So yesterday, we went over all of our staff, and I mentioned to you there were some that were not here yesterday that would be here today. So those of you guys who are here today, staff that were not here yesterday, if you would stand up so I can introduce you. We have Yolanda Avery back here. Yolanda's over Equitable Services. She is also the liaison for the charter schools. Jennifer Adams. Jennifer has Title I-D, and she also has foster care and Region 1, correct? And Region 1. And then LaDonna Rudolph. LaDonna has Region 8. LaDonna has Region 8 as well as homeless education. Anyone else that I missed? Okay, perfect. Parking lot. There was an email that went out on yesterday. Did anybody not receive an email from Nia, from our ASA regarding the Title III allocations? Anybody did not receive an email? Oh, perfect. Okay, everybody's in answer. Perfect. Okay, parking lot. We have 2 parking lot questions. Becky and LaDonna, if the two of you guys will make your way up here. One of the questions, Becky, will go with you first. And I think she answered it for the district, but want to make sure everyone hears it. The question was regarding transportation for migrant students.
Yeah, the question was about transportation of migrant students within the 2 miles of the school. You're talking about a protected population, and so best practice is going to be to provide that transportation. Now, if you have 1C funds, you can use those 1C funds to transport migrant students.
Any follow-up questions to that, you guys? And the same thing with homeless, transportation for homeless students. I guess the question is, do they have to?
Okay, good morning. So we all know and understand that transportation is a right, correct? And if transportation is a barrier to a child's education, then you need to provide that transportation. Now, there are some districts that don't use school buses and don't provide transportation. They have car riders and people walk to school. So you have to think about those services have to be comparable to whatever you're doing for all other children. However, back to the barrier. If it's a barrier for that child, to that child's education, then transportation needs to be provided.
Thanks. Any other questions that you guys have from yesterday before we move on? Okay, perfect. Anything from your note-taking tool? Check your note-taking tool. Anything on there that we didn't answer, you still have questions about, we'll have an opportunity, I think at the next break, to revisit. Here are a list of LEAs. If your LEA is listed, please see Angela. Angela, stand up for me. I introduced her yesterday. She's our accountant. If your LEA is listed, please see her. There's some issues, meaning you're not spending your money, guys. We need to spend the money. We need to spend it in the year that it was given with the students that generated the funds. When we don't spend money, we send the message that we don't need money. We're in the state of Alabama. We are a poor state. We need our money. You all know, I don't have to say that there are folks that are trying to take funds. We know that moving forward, we'll probably get less at some point. We can't afford to send the message that we don't need our money. If there's anyone in here, you have a large balance, you don't know how to spend your funds, you give us about 15 minutes to look at the data in your LEA, and we're going to tell you what you might want to consider doing to spend your funds. So again, please see Angela at break, at lunch, and you'll be here throughout the day, correct? She'll be here throughout the day. Okay, so we have a treat for you guys today. Next up is Tiffany Kessler. Tiffany is, and you know I don't have a bio or anything, so I'm just going to shoot this go. So Tiffany is an attorney with the Brewman Group. She is kind of like a friend. She's like our buddy, kind of like a family member that comes around all the time. She really is. Her law firm is considered the authority on federal education grants, which is why we have a contract with them. The State Department of Education, we have a contract with them. So she's here to give you guys some information that you need as new federal programs directors and coordinators. Any questions that you guys have for her, as she's going through, she's going to stay and answer a few questions. We'll have about 30 minutes for questions. A couple questions were submitted already, and we'll go over those as well. So introducing you guys to Tiffany Kessler.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So thank you, Molly, and the State Department. I like that it's family, like whether you like me or not, you're stuck with me, just like your family. So as I get set up here, a little bit of my background. I have been doing federal education programs for 19 years. I've had the pleasure of working with almost all the state education agencies, with a few exceptions, as well as school districts around the country, and the state of Alabama now for, I don't even know, probably our firm has been working with them for the last 15 years or more than that. So I'm a lawyer, but my area of focus is federal education compliance. So we really primarily focus on grants from the Department of Education. My areas of expertise are in ESEA, so the Elementary and Secondary Education Act programs, as well as IDEA, the Individuals with Disability Education Act. And then my two law partners also work on CTE, Career Tech, Perkins. So we do elementary, secondary, and post-secondary work. So you are welcome to all the federal programs, all the things you never wanted to know about education. Probably no way why you started in the job here to then learn about all these statutes. So I'm the boring presenter because I talk to you about regulations and statutory compliance and what happens if you don't comply. But, you know, unfortunately, it is a balancing act, and when you learn a little bit, you kind of keep learning more and more. So as you continue to go to professional development, you will probably have the ultimate pleasure of seeing me again. I'm luckily able to always speak at AFIPA, which is your Alabama Federal Programs Group, as well as some other conferences. So, welcome. So here's my session. I was asked to really talk about high-level overall compliance. So we are going to cover really an overview of the statutes and the regulations that comply, and try to give you a bunch of links in the slides as well, so those should be shared with you if they haven't been already, on online resources that you have. But the goal that I always have when I talk to groups is I want you to try to leave with more answers than questions. So please stop me if you have questions. You will not throw me off. I will make sure there's still time for questions at the end, and I will not end late, also because I have a flight to catch because I live in Washington, D.C. So I will make sure that we end on time. So we're going to start with a federal programs overview. We're going to talk about how to balance the different laws that exist when it comes to federal laws. We're going to talk about EDGAR a lot, grants management systems, and some documentation requirements. So to get started, this is my meme day. So I have a lot of hopeful memes out of these schools. Give you some laughs as I talk about regulations, which is really boring. So let's start talking with federal programs overview. You're going to hear a lot of discussion around EDGAR. EDGAR are the Education Department General Administrative Regulations. The way federal programs work, and I have more slides on this, is you have program statutes, right? So you have the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, which was reauthorized as the Every Student Succeeds Act, right? So ESEA or ESSA, we're talking about the same law. That is multiple titles. People always call that Title I. As you've learned, and we'll review the next today as well. There are actually 9 titles in ESEA. So 1A is the largest funded program, which is for our low achieving students. But there are other titles, as you know. There's 1C for migrant, 1D for neglected and delinquent, 2A professional development, 3A, right, 4A, 21st century. They all come out of ESEA. But we also have what are called cross-cutting regulations, and that's what EDGAR is. It is a regulation by the Department of Education that applies to every federal grant that you get from the Department of Education. So whether it's CTE, IDEA, ESEA, migrant, doesn't matter. They all have to follow EDGAR. And that's where we get our rules for obligation and timely obligations and period of availability and when can you start to spend your funds, things like that. There's a second set of rules called the Uniform Guidance. Now, it says it's the Uniform Guidance, but it's been adopted into regulation, so it's law. But everyone has always called it the Uniform Guidance or the Uniform Grants Guidance. The difference between EDGAR and the Uniform Guidance, EDGAR applies to the education money you get, Uniform Guidance applies to all federal funds you get. So if your district also gets USDA money, or Department of Labor money, or you get a Department of Justice grant, right, for safe schools or something, we also follow the Uniform Guidance. That's where you get these fun terms that will haunt you in your dreams. Necessary, reasonable, allocable, necessary, right? It's where we get our rules around procurement, inventory, financial management, tracking, documentation. So we work those together, the education grants that you have. But that is ultimately the difference. So if you end up looking at a school nutrition program, or you just got more nutrition money, do you have to do this? How would uniform guidance? You're looking at Title I, it's both as well as EDGAR. So we're gonna play a little, I'll keep going through this. So first, some common acronyms. Now remember, the goal of this is not that you now memorize all these and you can test each other at lunch. It's like a really fun game. Do you remember what that was? You can ask each other, would this be allowable, right? You can have all these fun conversations at lunchtime or during your breaks. But again, UGG, I refuse to call it that because those are boots. That's not a law, but there you are. We have EDGAR, of course, ESEA. Again, some of these are a little technical, but you'll hear them. PTE is pass-through. That is the state, right? That is the Alabama State Department of Ed. So when you see slides talking about you have to go to your pass-through, you need approval from your pass-through, that is always going to be the State Department. That is always going to be your main contact, which are all of the people in this group. But these are just some, so when you see Title I, or someone will say, I'm the Title I director. Oh, is that the program director? Well, it's actually all of them. Or I'm the federal programs director. Well, I'm like, oh, is that every federal program? They're like, no, just 1 and 2. I'm like, well, then you have other people working in federal programs too, right? So we just sort of use these terms interchangeably a lot. So it's trying to also work on this. And when we get into deeper dives later in training on some of the specifics, you'll hear some of these other terms. But basically, the short answer is the Federal Audit Clearinghouse is where you will upload your single audits that you get every year. You spend over $1 million of federal funds. All stuff to learn later, just like for fun. GAAP is more than just a store at the mall. These are accounting procedures and policies and principles, which I know nothing about because I'm not an accountant, and you don't need to learn them either. But hopefully you have an accountant that does know what they are, right? That's the key there. The GAN, that is the key to all of this. When you get the GAN from the state, it means you can start to actually draw your money down. Okay, that's why you're working on your applications right now, right? To get those applications approved, the state got their GAN, your districts will get the GANs. That is the official, like you have money and you can now spend the funds. Right, SAM, we look up this to make sure our vendors aren't debarred. SAT is where we get some thresholds for procurement. And then your CFA is your end of year accounting record that says this is how much money we actually expended. Right, again, it's some accounting. Again, don't worry about a lot of these terms right now. It's just like, you can keep these fun slides and just look at them every now and then. Other definitions that we see a lot, right? Districts. So terms, contractors, you hire them, you use your procurement process to hire them. Right, they're your contractors, the ones you literally will enter into a contract with, sometimes a purchase order. You have the federal agency here, for our purposes, the Department of Ed. You're all considered to be non-federal entities, meaning you are not federal agencies. Pass-through, we covered that, right? The state is the pass-through. You are what we call at the bottom here the subrecipient, because the state is the recipient, you are the subrecipient, so you are here at the bottom. And that's because funds go from the U.S. Department of Education, the federal agency, to their recipient, which is the State Department. The state then gives you money, which makes them the pass-through. You are the subrecipient. So when you look at the laws, when you look at some of these links, you're trying to determine if something is allowable, and it says subrecipients or other subrecipients, that is you. You are subrecipients. As school districts, you're considered to be local governments. Legally, you are considered to be part of a local government. You follow the rules of local government, and you follow the rules federally as the subrecipient. Right? So when you see recipient or pass-through, that's not you. You are down here as the subrecipient. But ultimately what that means is the state signs assurances that they're going to comply with every law I'm talking about today, and you actually do the same thing when you fill out your applications, when you apply for funding. You will also be signing assurances, and at the end of the day, signing that assurance is just a friendly reminder that you have to comply. Whether or not you signed those assurances or not, you have to comply with these rules. Simply receiving federal funds means you will comply with all of these rules. It's kind of like speeding, right? You're like telling the officer, like, I didn't know what the speed limit was, and they're like, that's your problem, not mine. That's federal funds, right? Saying like, I didn't know we had to do that. They're like, you had an obligation to figure it out. So entering into the world of federal programs is truly like drinking from a fire hose. But do keep in mind, it's like learning bits at a time, and we'll sort of talk about how to navigate that. So yes, let's talk about the hierarchy of laws, right? Because I'm here to talk to you about the federal law. The states here have been talking to you about your state law, and then of course you will have local policies and local procedures and local processes. So how do you balance all of those? So all you have to do within maybe the next week or two is learn all the program statutes, all the regulations, and read all the guidance. It shouldn't take you that long, right? No problem. And then you'll be experts in all the programs. Again, what I would tell you is I've been doing this for 19 years, and I'm still rereading sections. I still carry an Edgar book with me everywhere I go to answer questions, right? It's not knowing all the answers off the top of your head, it's knowing where the resources are so that you can answer those questions, right? I think that that's the biggest part, is one of the things I do recommend to all of you, is just learn where your resources are. Where is the Title I guidance? I wouldn't even worry about the statute. I think statutes are very hard to read, don't even worry about that. Just look at guidance. I have a lot of recommendations on documentation to look at. That's a lot easier to sort of maneuver, easier to read, and will help keep you in compliance. For the same reason, I would never tell you to read all of Edgar. I'm gonna give you some sites, I'm gonna give you some links, like look up things when you need them. Just know where the resources are. Half the time, your answer will be in guidance that already exists, so it's just a matter of kind of knowing where to look. And the problem too, right, is we have statutes. So when Congress is doing things and not fighting, they pass statutes. That's ultimately what they're supposed to be doing, right? It doesn't happen very often right now, but so they're passing statutes. That's ESEA, that's IDEA, that's career and tech. What happens is when a statute is passed, it is then essentially given to the federal agency that has to administer it, and then that federal agency can write regulations on how to comply. So as an example, Title I says you have to give parents notice before the start of school. Right? There's a lot of notices we give parents before the start of school. The regulations say that notice has to go at least 14 days before. Right? So regulations will often clarify statutes. Because again, congressmen, they're not experts in every type of program of statutes that they pass. So statutes tend to be broad, and then regulations are written by the federal agencies on how to actually implement the programs, but they both have legal effect. So what you will usually find is statutes are broad, regulations help kind of clarify things. As I mentioned, we have these other programmatic, these are programmatic, these are what we call those cross-cutting regulations that apply to everything. And then of course, you're gonna have Alabama laws and regulations. And the way it works in this country is Alabama can be more restrictive, usually not less, unless the law allows them to be less restrictive. So anytime we have an Alabama law creeping into one of my sessions, it's because they are more restrictive. And as an example, under federal law for procurement, you don't have to get an RFP unless something is over $250,000. In Alabama, if it's not subject to an exception, it's $40,000, right? That's where they are more restrictive, right? And then of course, the state is gonna have rules and regulations like you cannot start to spend your funds until you have a substantially approved application, right? Which means you have to submit something into EGAP. Am I saying the wrong one? Or ACIP, or one of the many fabulous programs that exist. But they're gonna tell you, like, this is what you have to do here in order to start that. And then even on top of that, you may have local rules, right? Your own board may say you can't start to spend until we've approved something. So it is about sort of navigating all of those. This is my tutorial of if you aren't a lawyer and you need to find a regulation of sort of where it's found. So again, you do not need to memorize this. I've given you a link. You can literally just type in a regulation and they will show it to you. But this is our uniform guidance. It's in Title II of the Code of Federal Regulations, Part 200, Section number 1. You don't really need to know this, but it just makes me sound smart. Okay. So what do you actually have to follow? Right, all of them. You have to follow all of them. And the question is, how do you follow all of them? It really is a hierarchy, right? So I would say most of the time, you're not gonna end up looking at the statute because the statute's really broad, you're gonna sort of understand that. It's gonna be the program regulations. The Title I regulations, I think, are a lot clearer than the statute. There are, of course, gonna be other regulations, your state laws, and there's a lot of guidance by the Department of Education. They have guidance on everything from parent notifications to equitable services under Title I to equitable services under Title IX to how you operate under Title II. There really is a guidance document for almost every single program. It might be dated from 2004 or 2008. It might not be, quote, recent, but that will be the most recent version of it. So I know the state is really, I'm pretty sure the state's website has a list of a lot of the guidance documents as well. So like that's a great place for you to utilize is the state's federal programs website, because they also have then the state guidance on those programs as well. And those will incorporate all of the above, right? So again, I think it's a really good place to start there. So who is Edgar? I mean, you can't have Secretary McMahon and not have a picture. Right? And I actually had someone who just had me watch the documentary. Have you watched the documentary, some of you? I wasn't a wrestling person. That probably comes as a shock to you that I was not a wrestling fan growing up. But I learned a lot. There you go. So there he is. So let's talk about Edgar. Do these rules apply to you? Right? We said all education funds. So what I've done here is try to highlight which sections matter for you. Right? State administered programs. IDEA, ESEA, Perkins. These are state administered programs, meaning all of the money flows from the state to you. That's what we call state administered programs. The above direct grants, some administrations give money directly to districts. The district would apply directly to the U.S. Department of Ed. Your grant award notice would come directly from the U.S. Department of Ed. The state has no involvement at all. We don't really see a lot. I don't think we've seen direct grants since it was either George W. or the Obama administration. It was one of them, but it's been many years since we've seen a direct grant program. So we're going to focus on Part 76. There are also some definitions, and I've given you the direct link to the U.S. Department of Education's website. Their website also has the links to all the parts of Edgar, the uniform guidance sections, and a lot of their guidance as well. The Department of Ed did redo their entire website. It is by program, so if you have a Title II question, you can go to Title II, and they'll have all the guidance documents. If you have equitable services, they will have all the documents. So, like I said, I recommend kind of looking around the web, the internet, and saving the pages so that when you have that question, you kind of know what areas to go to. Like I said, the state has a lot of that already linked for you on their pages too. The uniform guidance also has a ton of sections, right? All of these sections technically apply, but where we spend the majority of our time, yes, there's acronyms, definitions. We worry here, what's called post-federal award requirements, because the pre-federal award is how the states get their money, right? We don't care how the state gets their money. That's not relevant for you. You care about how do we have to spend the money once we get it. So we kind of hang out in post-federal award and cost principles. And I have some of these summarized, a lot of the major rules summarized for you on these slides. Again, links to things so you can access them. At the end of the day, all of your costs have to be allowable. Like a work puppy should absolutely be allowable for like anxiety and mental health. And how cute is that little dog? It's so cute. I have a 100-pound rescue, so it's not cute like that, but I mean, there we go. Necessary, reasonable, allocable. The majority of your costs will fail because they are not necessary or reasonable or allocable. You will literally hate those terms. Everyone in the back is like, yeah, we say those all the time. All of these rules are required to be allowable, but what we really end up focusing on is the top three, and those are the top three I'm going to focus on today. Other rules, they have to comply with the cost principles. That means the uniform guidance rules. They have to be consistent with your policies and procedures. One of my warnings to you. Now, frankly, a lot of districts don't have policies and procedures. Right, one of the resources that the state has now in place are some templates that districts can utilize if you don't have policies and procedures in place. So if you go and you don't have anything, it's always like, oh, this is the way we do it. Put on your list over the course of this year to get some written policies and procedures. It's the #1 finding that we see because they either don't exist, they're not updated, or they're not compliant. And we've had some changes to the uniform guidance that went into effect in July, so it's a good time to just make sure you have them. As a new federal programs director also, you want to be familiar with what the processes are at the district. And no, you do not have to be a trained lawyer to read your policies and procedures and know if they're outdated, because how I usually figure it out is part of the policy and procedure will say, like, if you want to procure something or purchase something, fill out this form. It's in triplicate on carbon paper, and the pink copy goes to procurement, and the yellow copy goes to the principal. How many of you think you're filling out forms in triplicate still? Right? Probably not. That probably gives you a solid indication that these are outdated procedures, probably not being used. So it's about making sure that you are being consistent, because if your policy says, in order to purchase something, you need 72 signatures and 45 parents to vote on that, and you're not doing that, you are out of compliance. All of those costs can be determined to be unallowable, right? There's no reason for that, so you might want to say, we're just going to take that out of our procedures, right? So you want to make sure you're not making your procedures a best practice, you're making your procedures how you're actually operating, right? We just want to make sure that they're compliant. Make sure consistent treatment as directs or indirects. The consistent treatment rule is this. I get a lot of questions, for example, that we have a Title I teacher who is in the military reserves and they've been called to duty. Can we pay them while they are on military leave? What is my answer? Would you pay them if they were state funded? If you would pay them with state funds, you pay them with federal funds. We have a teacher going on medical leave, can we pay them? I mean, you name the leave, and I have had the question, vacation leave, medical leave, maternity leave, military leave, I don't care what it is. From a consistent treatment rule, would you pay them with non-federal funds? Do your policies and procedures say that they get paid? The answer is yes, my answer is yes. If the answer is no, the answer is no. With federal funds, it's no more but no less. Same thing with like per diems or travel rates. You cannot have different rates for state-funded employees or federally funded employees. We use the same rates, consistent treatment. Following GAAP, again, those generally accepted accounting procedures. It just means your accounting has to be in accordance with that. You don't have cost sharing or matching in your programs. And then of course, making sure we're doing adequate documentation, right? We always want to show that when you're purchasing something, for example, you're following procurement, that your plan is broad enough to include the projects you want, and that if it's not, you get approval. Federal funds is better to ask permission than forgiveness. Forgiveness is usually because there's a finding and you're trying to avoid a returning of funds. And nothing is going to be more awkward than a conversation between you and your superintendent to say, well, we have to pay back all this money because I didn't spend it right the first time. Trust me, I've been a part of those conversations. Those are the worst conversations to have. Versus this is sort of the way we need to do things. So what is necessary? Necessary means it is in your plan. It is for the efficient operations or performance of the grant. That means it's in your plan because your plans are based on a needs assessment. You do a needs assessment at your, like the way that your schools will do a needs assessment for their school-wide plan, right? At the district level, you're going to create a plan based on what you believe the district needs are. Which means if it is not in your plan, I don't believe it's necessary. So if it is not in your plan, it is unallowable. Now that doesn't mean that things can't change throughout the year, but that's why we have plan amendments. Because you may have a great idea, listen, you're new. You might be doing a lot of like, this is what we did last year, let's see how it goes, or we don't have the data to know how it went last year, so let's see how it's working. And then middle of the school year, you may say, no, really great idea, let's try it. Just make sure you're amending your plan beforehand, right? Especially when you're newer, I know you're kind of playing a lot of catch up, you want to see how things operate, that's how you should be operating. But it has to be in your plan to be necessary. Reasonable, yeah, there's a lot of words on these slides, but reasonable comes down to following your procurement process. Listen, everybody hates procurement. There are a lot of rules, I get it. All right, there are a lot of rules in procurement. You have to get bids, you have to get quotes, you have to do RFPs, and I am going to be a stickler for that. I am the queen of no. You ask me something, I'm going to be like, no. Cannot? No. Because my state friends will tell you that. I'm like, no, well, tell me more. Maybe, right? Because the no is always easier than the yes. Look at all the rules I've already been talking about, and you have to make sure every cost meets all of those rules. One of the easiest rules is reasonableness because in theory, if it follows your procurement process, it is reasonable in cost. It's when you don't follow your procurement process that we question the reasonableness of the cost. For example, we have seen, no quotes, no bids. There are some sole sourcing exceptions, which is what we call a sole source exception. But usually, if they are not utilized the right way or there isn't documentation explaining the why, we will question the cost. under the premise of we as a society believe competition brings costs down. So when we don't go through competition, we do question, right, the cost. And remember, I'm a lawyer, so here's the shock of the world. Like, most people don't come to me and go like, I think things are great, do you want to come and make sure? That's not usually why I'm brought in, right? I'm brought in because it's like, so apparently we don't have any rules and everyone's arbitrarily buying things and I don't know what's going on and I have no receipts or paperwork for the last 3 years, right? Like, that's usually what will happen to me, right? So we see this a lot. So we want to make sure that we have that documentation in place, right? Because that is how we prove reasonableness, right? So the reasonableness, yes, it uses terms like sound business practices and arm's length bargaining. But remember, as the person who is involved in the fraud, waste, and abuse in education funds, when you don't go through procurement and there's no documentation as to why we just gave a contractor a contract, I assume it's because there's fraud or a conflict of interest. You should just know, like, that's where my brain goes. I'm like, oh, there's clearly a problem here, let's pull it, and now we gotta dig into what went on. It could be totally above board, and I'm going to assume that that's not the case. But the problem is so will the Department of Education. So the way that it works is the U.S. Department of Education monitors the state. Now remember when I told you, the U.S. Department of Education gives their funds to the state gives their funds to you. So the U.S. Department of Education will never monitor you directly because you are not their grantee. Their grantee is the state. The state monitors you because you are their subrecipient. But when the U.S. Department of Education monitors the state, they usually pick 3-ish school districts to go to. So it will look exactly like a monitoring. They're going to ask you for documentation, school-wide plans. They're going to want to talk to your teachers, your parents, your family members, right? They want to make sure what the state is doing is enough to ensure compliance. So what will happen a lot is if the U.S. Department of Education finds non-compliance at the district, the finding will be against the state for failing to make sure the district was in compliance. Well, what do you think happens if the U.S. Department of Education makes a finding against the district, but against the state for not ensuring they're doing it right? Usually what happens is the states then go to that district and make the same exact finding, right? Because everyone now knows that something was happening incorrectly. So it's another way to check to make sure that you are complying with these rules. So necessary is in your plan, and reasonableness is going through procurement. And these same rules apply to your schools. When your schools ask you, can we use our money for X? Can we use our money for Y? Your first question should always be, is it in your plan? If it is not in their plan, or they can't tell you the answer, that's where little red flags should go up. Because a lot of principals don't read their plans. They're not familiar with them, they don't know what they are. Right? And part of your training is to them to say, you need to show me where it is in your plan. If it's in your plan, that means that we've approved it. And if it's in my plan, it means the state has approved it, right? So everything that applies to you applies to them. And then allocable. Allocable is the one that is very easy in theory. It's a little bit more difficult in practice because what allocability says is you have to use the items that you purchased to benefit the program that paid for them. So if you are funded with Title I, if your salary is paid 100% out of Title I-A, you can only work on Title I-A. Because if you work on another program, your salary is not fully allocable to Title I because you are not benefiting Title I 100% of your time. Right? That's why we like school-wide schools at the school level because teachers teaching in Title I, all students are Title I eligible, so we can fully fund them with Title I. But if you are a federal programs director who is administering 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? You either have to consolidate your admin and get paid out of a pool, or you have to proportionately charge your salary to those programs, or get paid out of state funds. And that's allocability. Where I love to pick on allocability is supplies, because we think of supplies. What are supplies? Paper, binders, everything in this lovely artist loft, right? Those are all supplies. But you will see when you look at your budgets how much money you spend across your district on supplies. Hundreds of thousands of dollars we spend on supplies. Just think of paper alone. How do you make sure the programs are benefited by those supplies? Now, I don't need you tracking every pencil or every composition notebook, right? And making sure that the students who hold those, I don't need you targeting them, yeah, that's a whole lot of problems. But we will look to see sometimes what we call our internal controls, what controls you have in place to sort of make sure that what you are purchasing are actually benefiting those programs. So for example, I'm gonna pick on special ed here because of all the paperwork. Special ed, your special education director wants to purchase a really large printer copier. Because of course they're constantly printing out IEP drafts for parents and other groups, right? So they want their own printer for a capacity standpoint. You're like, okay, great, we're gonna fund that with IDEA, totally makes sense, great. My question to you is, how do you make sure that printer is only benefiting special ed? There's nothing in the law that's gonna tell you how to do this, right? These are about controls to meet allocability. So some solutions are you put a code, right? So you have to have the code. Other solutions are, well, we actually keep that printer in our special education director's office, right? And only certain computers can actually print to it, right? Only the special education director or the teachers or the related service providers, no one else can actually print to those machines. Those are what we call controls that assures me the cost of that copy machine is allocable to the special ed office. Does this make sense? Yeah, these are really technical rules, but when you kind of take a step back sometimes, you're like, okay, I get it, right? In addition to those basic cost principles, we also have 55 selected items of cost in the law. We're gonna go through all 55. No, we're not, obviously, right? Because I don't want you falling asleep, it's too early. I don't know if you've had enough donuts or coffee yet, okay? But the reason why I like this meme here is because I've had other districts tell me federal funds are no food, fun, or flair. So they say federal funds are no food, fun, or flair, okay? I think it can be fun. Learning is fun. There's some fun in here, but alcohol is not allowable, I'm sorry. That's the very clear no. I've been rallying for that for a while. As someone who started out in special ed and has sat through 80,000 meetings, which go on for hours and hours, and now has a child in it, you're like, a drink would be nice right now to go through it all. And usually people really want adult beverages after they hear me speak, but still not allowable with your federal funds. So do me a favor, when you are on work travel, if you do want an adult beverage, put it on a separate bill, because we have seen findings where federal directors are putting the receipt on, even if they subtract the drink from their reimbursement, because they didn't subtract the applicable tax. So they get really into the weeds on that one. Separate receipts, it will save you a headache. Entertainment and prizes. Remember, think of food, fun, flair, and assume the answer is always no, okay? So entertainment and prizes will fall under the no, because incentives are not allowed, right? Because your kids are supposed to be going to school, they're legally required to be there. And then we look at entertainment, insert every field trip you ever want to take your kids on or your teachers or principals want them to go on. Again, our assumption is always going to be that it is for entertainment purposes. I realize there are a lot of field trips that are not entertainment based, but there's a clear difference between a theme park and a hands-on science museum. And I understand, I know every theme park, listen, 19 years, okay, every theme park is gonna say, oh, we have a whole science physics kit. We give the kids when they walk into that is not, you're not there for the science and the physics. All right, they're there to go ride rides, and I get that. So we're just not gonna use our federal funds to pay for that part. But hands-on science museums or things like that where it's hands-on, yes, you can probably get there easier. But the real key here is you don't have to convince me. You have to convince them in the back. Okay? So the more you can strategically show that it is program-based, the better. The other key here, and this is where the future of education is going, right? It's gonna sound again really basic, but the law is changing to make sure we focus on it. They're really focusing on data. And what they're now terming the phrase continuous improvement. This is a change that started this past July. And what the law is saying is that there has to be continuous improvement of your programs. So what that means for you is, as you are working on your next application, right? Because I know your funds are gonna come on October 1st, and you're new. So I recognize there is a little bit of a difficulty for you if you don't have experience with some of the programs your schools are running. This is where I would recommend you work with some of the staff that you have at the central office, at the school level. Get some feedback. What programs do they think were successful? Why do they think those programs were successful? Did they see an increase in achievement? Did they get more students attending? Did they get higher rates of participation? Whatever it is, why did they think that those programs were successful? Because what you have to do in your applications, correct me if I'm wrong, Jennifer, is they now will put in how they plan to evaluate the programs, right? So you're gonna say not only, this is the program we want to implement, and this is the need that we have, but this is how we plan to evaluate this program and how it's going to work. Because now at some point, even in the middle of the school year, you are gonna have to look at those programs, because it's not gonna be continuous improvement unless you do it at least in the middle of the year. Are our programs working? And if they're not working, if students aren't attending, if you're not seeing an improvement, there is going to be an obligation on you to tweak those programs and to make some changes to see if they are going to be successful. So I think you get a little wiggle room from a innovation standpoint, right? Like I have a new idea. And what I talk a lot about with the state is they want to give you the flexibility, but what we've talked a lot about is, okay, let's try it. Right? Let's try the new program you want to do. How do you plan to evaluate it? And let us know how it's going. And if you're successful at the end of the year, it can be something that you can continue. If you're not, it's going to be a hard sell to maybe do it another year, right? So it is about you really focusing on not only what are we doing, but is it actually at the end of the day improving student achievement? Because I don't care what program you're working on, 1C, 1D, 2A, 4, it does not matter to me. All of those programs are student-based on academic performance and academic achievement. And I'm not just talking grades, right? It might help, with the climate of the school. You might have less, physical altercations. You may have less students ending up in detention, right? There's a lot of parameters that you are addressing in your schools. You want to make sure the programs are addressing those, because if you lower even those risks, academic performance should eventually increase as well. So focus really on the evaluation piece and what data you have or what data you might need. That has been, in fairness, an area that I think has been lacking in schools for a long time. I think we were really hyper-focused on COVID and getting through all of that. And now schools across the country are trying to refocus. So coming in new doesn't really put you at a significant disadvantage. This is really new for a lot of people. And how are we really going to evaluate this effectiveness and now look at this continuous improvement? Other questions on that? It's a heavy lift for you, in fairness. So thinking about it on the front end and getting that feedback of what you think would be helpful, I think actually puts you at an advantage, to be quite frank. Because I think one of the advantages I have sometimes as someone who is not in academics, I have 2 kids in elementary school and I understand very little about the programs that they're running in my own children's schools. But what I would tell you is sometimes the strength is in asking those questions. Because the people that have been there for a long time assume that they already know all that information, and I think sometimes there's a lot of strength in saying, well, why do you think that's helpful? Or what information are you using to look at that? Or what do you think would be helpful? I think you're going to find most people have not thought through a lot of those questions. Advertising and public relations, right? So this is going to be billboards, signs. Tiffany, I want to put a graduation sign on all the high school students' front lawns when they're graduating. And I'm going to tell you why. Right? Like, why do you want to do that? Just to make them feel really good? Because then it's probably not going to be allowable, right? Because that is advertising. Anything you're putting your name on or anything you want to put like that, we want to buy a billboard, we want to do all those things, are going to be considered to be advertising or public relations costs. Again, you're going to notice programmatic purpose. How does it tie to the program? Of course, you advertise procurement. You're going to advertise when you're trying to hire teachers and staff, right? That kind of advertising is allowable. Where we get into trouble sometimes is the program outreach. If you're starting any tutoring program, yes, you're going to want to advertise that. And that's fine. You want to let students know you have these new things, let the families know. So paying for flyers or signs or whatever for that is going to be fine. We want to be careful that it's not considered promotional or memorabilia. So sometimes we do get into that with wanting to hire teachers and buy things at teacher, career fairs, for example. I get a lot of questions about, well, what can we give away at career fairs? Can we buy like a stress ball and give that away? I'm always like, listen, I don't think the selling point for you to hire is to be like, and here's a preemptive stress ball. I do think we should rethink that one of all the ideas that we have. But also, is it just going to say the name of the district, or is there going to be like at least an email address to call if you're interested in hiring, or a website that has the job openings? Like, where's the purpose? right? Or wanting to buy kids t-shirts. I've talked about all of the t-shirts you can imagine, from jean jackets to fancier things to t-shirts. And the question is why? You're gonna notice all my examples. It's not the item, it's the why behind the item. If you wanna buy a t-shirt so everybody knows that you are a great school, no, that is a promotional purpose. If you wanna buy a, so for example, I was just telling someone, my kids at their school, when they start kindergarten, they're given a colored t-shirt for their classroom, right? So like my son was yellow a couple years ago, and then they do this kindergarten play date and all the kids wear their shirts so that they know what kids are gonna be in their classes. It's part of how they meet the teachers wear the same color, right? It's how they meet other kids and start to get through that anxiety of starting kindergarten. And then those are the shirts they wear on all their field trips. Why do we like t-shirts on field trips? Is that for promotion? No, it's safety, so now can we probably buy it? Yes, probably. Again, you gotta convince them, but you're a lot closer than, I just want everybody to have a Haycock, you know, my school's Haycock, a Haycock shirt, right? Like go, I think they're the Cougars, I should know that. You know? So that's the thing, it's always the why, and tie it to the program, right? Because I do think, in the example I had, you saw the kids kind of their anxiety lower, more kids less nervous to go, more students showing up, more success, right? Even out of the first day.
Question,
Yes.
are you still talking about getting a t-shirt out of Title I or is that Title IV?
That is a great question. So are we talking about Title I or are we talking about Title IV? So Title IV's allowable uses, if you're not familiar with Title IVA, Title IVA has well-rounded educational opportunities, safe and healthy students, and then education technology, right? No more than 15% on the actual technology that you have. So the question is could we buy the t-shirts under Title I or Title IV? Who thinks Title IV? Come on, this is participation. I'm not gonna know if you raised your hand or you were right or wrong. Who says Title I?
Tell us how.
Tell us how. Oh, I can't do all the work for you. I actually personally think, depending on the justification and the reasoning and the students we're talking about, it could be one or both. I think 4A is as broad of money as you are going to get. 4A is the most broad money you will have for probably a long time, because safe and healthy students is everything from like nutrition, health, safety, right? So I think Title 4A is really easy. That would be all schools, all students, right? Title I is just your Title I schools and eligible students. So I think, again, depending on the schools you're going to do, you could probably do one or the other, right? Again, it's the justification, not the item. So the why, and the why you need it, and why it's important. And again, your reasonings are gonna differ school to school. Professional development, you can obviously go to conferences. Conferences is actually about hosting a conference, not going to a conference. When you see conferences, that is hosting. Like, so can I hold a conference for my teachers? Can I hold a conference for family members, right? Like, am I holding that? So they define conferences as disseminating technical information. They are allowable, you just have to make sure your costs are necessary, right? Ensuring costs are appropriate and necessary to minimize costs. But generally, yes, of course, you can hold a conference. And you have to do a lot of things. You have to have your school improvement, you know, your school-wide meeting with your families to talk about that. You may have other things too. Those are allowable, just remember no food. Because again, this will say, it's worth reminding, it says you can rent facilities, cost of meals, but remember, the Department of Ed is more restrictive, Alabama is more restrictive, right now no food in federal funds, okay? So use your general fund if you can for that. I don't know if are you allowed to state funds to buy food or just not federal? Okay, no food, everybody brings snacks. And your own donuts. And then travel is when you are going to a conference. Can you go to conferences? Yes. Your professional development is as important as the professional development for your teachers. I just told you federal funds is like drinking from a fire hose. 19 years, I still read the same guidance document over and over again, right? My strength is that I know where my resources are, right? And I think that is the best advice to share. So when you are going to take travel, your policies and procedures are critical here. Because what federal law says is if you don't have procedures on travel, you have to follow the federal travel procedures. And trust me, nobody wants to follow the federal travel procedures because anything in the federal government is complicated and hard to understand and their rates are horrible. Yours are actually higher than theirs. So you need to have travel procedures. How do you get your travel approved? And it should be simple things like, for example, you cannot book anything other than a standard room. I've seen districts by like the concierge level, that is not gonna be allowable. There is literally no reason for you to be on the concierge level. If you need to fly somewhere, no first class, that should be in your policies and procedures. And listen, I've heard it all. I've had superintendent, there are actually audit findings where superintendents and other staff have said, the only seat that was left was in first class, and it was a last minute change to our like arrangements. And I have to tell you, I travel almost weekly, and what I've now been telling people is in my life, when I've had to make changes to flights at the last minute, perchance, never has the only seat available been in first class. Ever, like ever, ever. Where is the last seat on the plane? Y'all know, middle seat behind, in front of the bathroom, every time. That is going to be the last seat on the flight. It's never going to be the site of first class, right? So you have to make sure necessary is maybe the travel itself is necessary. Reasonable is cost, right? So you want to make sure your travel rules really explain what your procedures are. If you don't have any, my recommendations are basic level expense, standard room, government rate if available. If available is really important, because if it's not available, you just want to go with the standard rate and keep the costs reasonable. Of course, you can pay your salaries of your staff, right? It's probably where the majority of the funds you have that go. In most of your budgets, significant amount of funds will go to salaries. But what the grants rule says is you can pay for your staff with salaries. But if you are going to pay staff, and this is employees, if you're going to pay employees with federal funds, they have to keep what's called time and effort documentation. Now, in the state of Alabama, these are the 6 standards. In the state of Alabama, we call them 2 basically types of documentation. A semi-annual certification or a personnel activity report. A semi-annual certification is if they're working on one cost objective. It's a 6-month certification signed by the supervisor and the employee currently. And then the PAR is a monthly certification. It's called a personnel activity report. That is completed monthly, also signed by the employee and the supervisor with knowledge. And there is even what's called a blanket certification. Those are in the Alabama, I believe in the manual that you gave them, right, the handbook. They talk about the PAR and the semi-annual. It is, the legal term is pain in the butt, but it is. It's one of the most burdensome areas of federal law. It has been in existence for decades. There have only been slight tweaks to these rules, unfortunately, throughout history. But if you do not have that PAR or that semi-annual certification, the salary can be questioned. Because that time and effort documentation is what tells the federal government that that employee's salary is allocable. It tells me, did this person actually work on the program that I am paying them with? That is how you prove allocability of a salary. Because let's be honest, right? I know you clocked in today, but I don't know what you actually did all day. And let's be honest, we all have that employee. We don't really know what they're doing most of the days. You know what I mean? Right? So it's the employee telling you, not only was I physically in the building today, but I actually worked on the Title II training with teachers, or I worked with migrant students today, or I did training with the Title I students. Right? That's what time and effort does. It says I spent 50% of my time working on this, or 100% of my time working on that, which means, for my favorite accountants who are in the room, right? You then can actually go back and say, okay, that means I can fully charge them under these programs. The reason why we need that time and effort documentation is you can absolutely have a scenario where you have a Title I director, normally paid 100% out of Title I, and then they come to you and they're like, listen, I didn't actually spend all my time working on Title I the last couple months because our Title II director's been on medical leave and I've been doing that also. So when that's the case, we can't fully charge that person with Title I, right? Wouldn't be allocable. So they tell you about what percentage they spent. It's reasonable basis, so they can kind of just look at their schedule. You pay them proportionally, maybe out of 1 and 2 for a couple months. When your Title II person comes back, you shift it back over. So it's really about how we manage how we're spending our federal funds. You can always undercharge the federal government. You can't overcharge the federal government. All right. And then we have all of these grants management systems. Now again, for time, I'm not gonna go through all of them with you. I actually talk about Edgar for an entire day of training. If you think this is tough, man, a whole day of Edgar regulatory training. We keep it as light as possible, but there are a lot of rules in fairness. You have a great staff at the State Department who are very familiar with all of these rules, so they will be able to answer the questions that you have. But from a high level, we have financial management system requirements, procurement system requirements, and inventory system requirements. So again, we're not going to go through all these, but it basically says we have to make sure the funds you're spending are the correct year, the correct award. Molly came up here in the beginning and said, if you're not spending, you have to spend. Why is that? Because each federal grant you get has very specific start and stop dates. For the most part, October 1 to September 30th, with the carryover of October 1 to September 30th. If you do not obligate those funds within those time periods, you lose the money. And as Molly said, right, we've been having a lot of challenges under this administration keeping the education funds that we have. Right now, the Congress has not finalized our fiscal year 26 funds for next year. But so far, the Senate has actually designated funds for all programs, like we've historically seen, which is a really positive step in the right direction. We think the House will make some cuts. Too early to tell, but we want to use the money up that we have, right? To Molly's point, if you don't use the funds you have, it's really hard to convince not only your state legislature, but also US Congress that education needs these funds, right? Because otherwise they're like, they're not even spending the money that they have. So it's making sure you have really detailed accounting and financial records, that we have those controls I mentioned to make sure we're spending the money properly and that you can account for it properly. You're following your budgets, you're drawing down funds after you spend them, and look, written allowability procedures. From a practical perspective, and you should be able to do this at your own districts. What I do when I go into a district is I would pick one of your school's budgets, I would pick a random line item from the last year, and I would ask to see every single purchase from that line item from that budget, including bids or quotes that they use to purchase everything under that line item. That is the level of documentation and detail you should be able to have. When schools don't have that, or have no documentation, what do I think? I've already warned you, where does my head go? I think, and I've said this before, well, how do you know your principal didn't go buy a car? Take $100,000 and go buy a house. And like, oh, they didn't do that. I'm like, but you can't prove that they didn't. You have no records of how that money was spent, right? So you don't want me to think that, right? So that is the level of documentation that we look for here. As I mentioned, period of performance. There is a set time period. You start to obligate your funds on October 1, and you have to stop obligating them on September 30th, unless you have that carryover here. The later your application, the less time you have to obligate those dollars. So what is an actual obligation? An obligation is a term we use in federal funds. It means a promise to pay. Think of it as the swiping of the credit card. I order something, you take my card, you swipe it, I have now promised to pay you if you do whatever it is you were supposed to do. And that is an obligation. So when can you start to obligate your funds? I'm going to talk more about obligations. The later of the two dates. Either the date the state can start, which for you would be no earlier than October 1st, or the date your application has substantial approval. So the later you get your application to the state in substantial approval form, the later or the less time you actually have to then obligate your funds. So that is the critical piece on making sure those applications are timely. You want as much time as you can to obligate those funds. So then what is an actual obligation, right? Telling you have that specific time. Now, the one exception is discretionary programs. And a discretionary program for our purposes are school improvement grant and 21st century. Because those are competitive grants that you apply to the state for. What that means is you cannot even begin to obligate funds until those applications are finally approved. Otherwise, substantial approvability means you can start to obligate. Final approval means you can start to draw the funds down. This basically says your plan looks good enough to start. Final approval before we actually give you your money. Any questions on that? You're going to want the money and you're going to be like, why can't I draw it down? Final approval is required to actually draw the funds down. So what is an obligation? Because it's the federal law, we can't make this too easy, so we have this overcomplicated chart to talk about when things obligate. So we have acquisition of property. I've tried to tweak the language a little bit because they use the term real or personal property. Real is land. You don't buy land with federal dollars in education. So it's really any of the property that you buy. So from laptops to books, all this stuff. That's what we call the date of the binding written commitment. So yes, it can be a contract, but if you purchase something online, it might be the printed receipt. Or in your district, you might need a purchase order for everything, or you might need a formal requisition for everything. You have to look at your procedures. In other words, what actually will bind those dollars? Is it the contract or the purchase order? And that should be clear in your procedures, right? That means it obligates. So if you want to order books, you want to order workbooks, let's say for some of your students in 3rd grade because you're still not as successful in math as you'd like to be, you have to wait for substantial approvability of your application. As soon as you get it, you can now order those workbooks. You order them too early, it's not allowable. Because you cannot start to obligate your funds until you have substantial approval. Your employees, you can start to pay them with federal funds once you have substantial approvability, because employees' salaries obligate when they work, not when they sign their agreement, not when the school year starts. So today's salary obligates today, tomorrow's salary will not obligate until tomorrow. So if you want to start charging your employees' salaries as of October 1st, you have to make sure you have an substantially approvable application prior to that, or on that date. Contractors are the contract, and then travel is actually when you take the travel. This is why in your travel policies, I do not recommend prepaying any travel, with the exception of a flight, because you have to pay for the flight. Do not prepay rental cars, hotels. I realize it's a couple dollars cheaper, but it is reasonable to not prepay because, again, you cannot charge it to the grant until you actually rent the car or check into the hotel. And for flights, what you would do is you would not reimburse your general funds until you take that travel, which means get on the plane. Any questions on that? I know this is a lot of information. And then if you are, let's say not you, but let's say you have a friend at another district who, for whatever reason, was really late with their application. Let's say, I don't know. Let's just say they were really late and maybe they didn't have a federal programs director and nobody knew how to do the paperwork, whatever. So they were really late. You can also request what's called pre-award costs from the state. But again, you would really have to show why those pre-award costs were necessary, and they'd only be allowable with the state approval, and that would be written approval. But there is some flexibility if there are unforeseen circumstances that end up delaying an application. And then after October 1, so you have October 1 to obligate. You're entering into contracts, your employees are working, contractors are performing, you're paying them, you're drawing down money, everything is going swimmingly. You are done on September 30th, you have fully spent all of your funds, you're feeling like you're just kicking butt with your first year or early years of your position as a federal programs director, and then you have until October 1 through mid-ish December to close out your books. That's called the closeout or the liquidation period. Not only does that mean you do your final accounting, your final payments, but if you have a couple contractors that still had some tutoring remaining, or you have a delivery that is still showing up, they're allowed to finish out their performance and then close out all of your books. All right, which will be all the final reports to the state as they request. So this is a very time-restricted process. Again, a day late, a day out, and it may not be determined to be an allowable cost. We also have purchasing and property requirements. I know I'm already going a little behind where I'd like to be, but I'll get there. As I mentioned, if you want a cost to be allowable, you have to follow procurements, all right? Remember, competition, making sure you're following your thresholds for purchasing, making sure your procedures are really clear on what those requirements are. The state has given you their handbook. It outlines all of those rules, including conflict interest rules, mandatory disclosures when you may have to report something happened to the State Department. And this is my summary for Alabama, right? So you have informal procurement methods, which are usually bids or quotes. $10,000 and under are considered to be a micro purchase where you don't need a quote as long as the price is reasonable. In Alabama, if there is an exception, We would go here if there's no exception, right? $40,000 if there's no Alabama exception to procurement. Otherwise, $250,000 if there is a state exception. Because remember, we're always going with the most restrictive rule. So if Alabama law says these types of costs are excluded, federal law would say, nope, you still need an RFP over $250,000. So for example, we have some examples here about educational materials. And then of course, there's non-competitive procurements, which is the sole sourcing I had mentioned. So Sibley says pretty much the same exact thing, except I've given you the Alabama code of where your exceptions to bidding are. So as an example, Alabama exceptions, it says, for example, attorneys, but here is where we get caught up, and this is what I want to point out to you. It says the purchase of manuscripts, books, instructional materials. Everything you want to buy, you're going to say is an instructional material and does not require RFP bids or quotes because it is an exception to Alabama state law. Please remember, at $250, you still have to go through an RFP process. So if you are buying curriculum, if you are buying entire things for your district, if you're getting anywhere near $250, you want to go through an RFP process. Remember, federal law will trump state law at that $250 mark. Otherwise, you will not have to do an RFP if it falls under one of those categories. And there's more than this. These are just the ones that I thought came up a lot in discussions with districts around the state. Again, you have the slides, you have all this. And then if you don't want to go through procurement, you have to justify it. You should have a sole source form where you actually explain why it's sole sourcing. And just know auditors and monitors are going to look at that with a fine-tooth comb. So don't tell me you're hiring a vendor for math curriculum because they have like copyrighted material, for example. So this is what everybody says. Every vendor will tell you their material is copyrighted, and that's why you have to sole source to them. But this is why that won't work on a sole source, because what you needed to purchase was third grade math material, and you need to show me why that vendor was necessary, not that their materials are copyrighted. Right? Because there are a lot of vendors that sell third grade math material. And you need to explain to me why no other vendor would qualify. And what I tell everybody is think of federal funds like your own money. If you were, for example, going to put an addition on your house, most of us, and I'm going to generalize here, I don't think would randomly pick a vendor that we met in the street and say, you know what, why don't you just come and give me a quote? I'm not going to get any other quotes or bids, so like whatever you think it should cost would be great and we'll just pay. Why would they give you their best estimate? And it's the same with educational materials, right? Why would a vendor compete for your business if you've already told them you are not going to compete it? So let them work for your business. I have seen it save districts hundreds of thousands of dollars. Right, when they just put out that RFP or they get a couple of other quotes. You'll be amazed to see all of a sudden what discounts come popping out from vendors once you do that. So sole sourcing is really like, we did go through an RFP last year, and this year we need the update that's copyrighted. You see the difference? If you buy the update this year, I'm gonna ask you how you selected them last year as the vendor. You always go back to that sort of original purchase. Oh shoot, I shut this off, so you have to guess what's on the next slide. The next piece that I do want you to focus on too is making sure every payment is a deliberate decision to pay. And what I mean by that is we see a lot of fraud in education because districts pay vendors for work that has never happened. You'd be actually like kind of shocked to see that that happens a lot, but it's true. So I always recommend that the process you have at your district is that someone signs off on every invoice that the work actually happened. And it can't be you at the central level, right? Because your principals should know what's happening at the school. You may not be able to know unless you're a really small school district. But someone saying like, yes, this tutoring happened. Yes, these books were delivered. Yes, that service provider showed up. Making sure that your accounting office or your payroll, somebody is saying and verifying that the invoices that they're paying are for work that happened. We see, unfortunately, a lot of fraud in education. Prior employees, contractors, they just submit stuff to see if you're going to pay it. And granted, your accounting office is like, well, why would they send me an invoice if they didn't do the work? Because they're criminals. That's what they do. Right? We see this happen year after year after year. So we want to make sure we get the bid or the quote, you get the PO or the requisition, they actually invoice you with some sort of proof of performance. You then pay them, and then you reimburse the funds. If we misstep, it could be an unallowable cost. And then, of course, tracking our equipment. Same process in place, right? Again, this comes down to eligibility and making sure that the products we are buying are benefiting the students and the programs. With the increase of technology and where technology is going, I think the newest challenge for you is going to be to think about what controls may be needed in your district to protect the equipment you're giving to students. I mean, you're giving technology to kids. Anytime you see me, currently true also, my phone has a crack in it. Do you think that was because of me or my 6 or 8-year-old? I want to throw that out there as a guess to see why, right? You're giving kids technology. They're going to drop it. They're going to throw it. It's going to get stolen, right? You may not need to invest in cases for everybody or in, a rebate or trade-in program for the broken ones, or you may have 30 kids that just throw them on the ground every day and you have to do that, right? You need to make sure that you are keeping your schools accessible to students, and that sometimes that may require that you invest in technology where you can track the computers, especially if we've had scenarios of students in really urban districts where their laptops are getting stolen and stolen and stolen, right? So they did finally invest in tracking software and they found it, or they invested in the software that remotely shuts it down. And guess what? That stopped the next one from getting stolen. So again, you might not need to invest in that in your district or for all your things, but that's where we're gonna end up going with technology, right? So it's about tracking it, clear property records, clear inventory, and you have an obligation to prevent loss, damage, or theft. So when we're seeing high levels of theft or damage, you do have an obligation to make sure you are addressing that. And then when you want to dispose of it, follow the state rules. There's some flexibility here, but generally we look at a $10,000 equipment threshold standard. And then for supplies, as long as the total aggregate of unused supplies doesn't exceed $10,000, there is no accountability, which means the laptops your kids have been using, you should have a depreciation schedule at your district. Computers after 3 to 5 years, we know they don't really start to work that great. You do need to replenish them or replace those. And the question is always, what do we do with the old ones? A lot of companies will now let you trade them in. They give you a little credit towards the next ones. That's great. I recommend that. Otherwise, some of you may want kids to keep them, right? Bring them home, especially some of our lower income students may not have a computer at home. You are able to do that as long as they are used and you followed your depreciation schedule. If you want to give them to local community centers or to some students, you have flexibility on being able to do that now. And then documentation, right? Documentation, document everything. Education is a paperwork heavy world. I'm sorry to tell you. The Paperwork Reduction Act, ironically, is like 2,000 pages. So think about that. The next 2 slides are really for your information. They are mandatory policies and procedures that you have to have. So look at your policies and procedures. Consider these nice little check the boxes. Add this to your list of things to do, which I'm sure has 90,000 things on it right now. But it is a good project. I would tell you something to work on so that you have updated policies and procedures. Ideally by the end of this calendar year, I would say no later than beginning of next year. If you have nothing, updating it shouldn't take as long. But those are procedures, those are policies. And why do all these rules matter? Because if you don't follow them, you have what's called remedies for non-compliance. This used to be called enforcement, but they thought that sounded too mean. So they renamed it to remedies for non-compliance, which just sounds so much lovelier. But essentially what this means is the state can always make findings. They are actually required to when they find non-compliance. Now the good thing is that your state agency is more focused on correction than penalty. So a lot of times they will work with you on correcting the non-compliance they're finding, but I will tell you right now, my advice to them is if you don't listen or you ignore, I do recommend that they recover costs. Because nothing gets an attention of a federal programs director or a superintendent more than paying back money. And why is that? Because when you have to pay money back, you cannot use federal funds to do it. You have to use non-federal funds, which means you have to go and get general funds to pay that back. So if you have a $50,000 or a $200,000 unallowable expense, you have to find general funds available to pay that back, which usually means your superintendent has to get involved and your board, and then it becomes a news story. You don't want any of that, right? Usually showing up in the news is not a positive thing. Granted, I'm jaded, I live in the DC area. We don't usually see news articles like, the federal programs director in Fairfax did such a great job this year. We don't usually see those kind of stories where I live. Maybe you're in Alabama, you have nicer news outlets. But those are conversations you certainly don't want to have. So I know this was a lot. I did promise time for questions. Again, fire hose, I do recognize that. But are there any, I know we took some questions, and I know there are some from yesterday as well. How do we do all of this? Or that was easy, I know all this already. I know.
Okay, I've got
Yes.
2 questions.
Sure.
First question, as a new director, there's quite a bit to know.
Yes.
What would you recommend priorities for the first 30 days on the job?
It's a great question. Okay, so for your first 30 days, breathe. Caffeinate. No, I would say I have so many recommendations, but I've also never been in your shoes. So I also recognize I have the easiest job in the room because I tell you what the rules are and you have to figure out how to do all of them, right? So my job is the easiest one for sure. My job is think about how people can screw things up, right? And recommend ways to prevent that from happening. So from my perspective, one of the things you can do is, my understanding is if you're not already working on your applications, you will be working on them because it's August. No, you should be working on them already. Being new, what I would recommend is look at the one from last year, but I also recommend looking at all the comments and the feedback. So if your prior director went back and forth or had amendments, I actually think going back to your original application and looking at that back and forth, I think will help you understand what your state is looking for, right? Because they're gonna give feedback, like this is not clear, or that was clear, or how does this tie? I think that will help you as you navigate maybe what they're looking for this year. What I don't recommend, and what I think happens a lot of districts, because you're busy and you're overworked, is a lot of districts will cut and paste prior year to current year. What I think lacks there is the evaluation piece and thoughtfulness of did it actually work, right? It's so we've done it this way because that's the way we've been doing it and that's the way we're gonna keep doing it mentality. But I think you can use this continuous improvement piece and the evaluation piece that the state has built in to be like, great, and I hear that, but is it working? Do the teachers like it? Why do they like it? Do the families like it? Do the kids, do they like it? I think one of the things that can benefit you, but it is time consuming, is to get that feedback from your staff. And I would say more than just your central level staff. At a minimum, I'd sample some of your schools as well, because I'm also really conscientious of the fact that sometimes central level staff thinks something is great, your school level's like, oh my God, we hate that program. Or like, it's too burdensome, or this is what we've been wanting to try, or right? So I think that will help you navigate. I do appreciate a lot of what you may be doing is kind of what we did last year. Like I said, an understandable form so that you start to get a feel for how your schools and how your district is operating. But I think even some of that feedback could help you with the current area. Another thing that you can do, which none of this takes, remember, I am not an accountant. In fact, I've tried to avoid accounting my entire life. And I don't say that lightly. I actually took the bar I took because it didn't have tax law. Like I was debating between 2 states and I didn't pick the other state, which made way more sense because I didn't want to learn accounting and tax law. Like I literally, and now all I do is read financial statements. So life was like, aha, what do they say? Like you plan. God laughs. So yeah, that's my life. But a thing that I think is also really helpful at districts is take your prior year budget and compare it to the year before that. I don't need you looking at the details of the budgets, but if you can get someone in your accounting team to give you like a high level budget from the last 2 years, what I tend to find is the carryover that school districts have are always in the same categories from year to year to year. Right? So I don't even need you to necessarily go through the numbers. I don't need you to look at how it was spent. I need you to look at what did we budget and what did we spend. And did we have carryover and where was it? And the reason why I say that is I've worked with districts, for example, who have said like, God, we really wish we could hire more teachers. And I'm like, well, every year you're carrying over like $150,000 in this category. And they're like, we are? I'm like, yeah, just just look. Why don't you just move 100 of that over and now you can hire more people? Like no one's done that sort of simple back-to-back amount. Now, in fairness, your staff will say, well, the reason why we carried over so much last year was because of X, Y, and Z. We don't think that will be a problem this year, right? But I do think sometimes going back 2 years, you can oftentimes see like a theme of where your district has been spending. And again, I think that's the difficulty of the like copy and paste from year to year, because you've been busy and you didn't have time, and you really wanted to get that substantial approval to start. But I think just sometimes that comparison. So the more you can just look at your current plan, right, the plan that you were operating under last year, your prior year budget to maybe the year before, I think that may end up helping you a lot as you have these last couple weeks to get your next plan in. And again, if you ran out of time and you want to get something submitted, I still strongly recommend that, even if you have to do an early amendment, right? Even if you're like, oh, actually, I just realized we have all this carryover from the year, we want to move this over. That would really be one of my initial recommendations to you, since you are kind of in the planning piece. Otherwise, from a professional development capacity piece, I would say look at the state's website and their guidance on kind of the programs, not in the details, but to get a bigger picture understanding of how the programs work, right? Like, what is the goal of Title I, Title II, Title III, Title IV? Like the question in the back of, could that be 4 or 1? Well, let's look at what generally the allowable uses are with 4. Is it a well-rounded educational opportunity, which by the way is all of Title I? Is it safe and healthy students? I look at Title 4A as what you use when Title I can't pay for it. Because Title 4A is more flexible, right? So if you can't use Title I, look to Title 4. That's why I love Title 4. I've always been a big Title 4A proponent, if you can't tell. We just don't get a lot of flexible money sometimes in education. So kind of just bigger, sweet pictures of like, okay, these are all the titles that we have. There's a million little rules in all of those. You're not gonna learn all of that in the next 30 to 60 days, right? But the broader sweep of just sort of understanding how the programs work together, and I would recommend that if you're looking at ALSDE's guidance. Even the handbook that you have in here, I haven't actually looked at this, but if I had to guess what's in here, right, yes, look, I was totally right, there it is. So this federal programs handbook, to the extent you can skim it and make notes, again, you're not going to memorize it, obviously, but that will give you a really good overview of how the federal programs are and what the general rules are. And then, after you kind of get your feet wet, after a month or two, then looking at things like policies and procedures and looking at those, I think, is the next step. Because where a lot of districts are going, I think, have a lot of non-compliance is on the cross-cutting piece, the procurement piece, the financial management tracking piece, the inventory piece. So that would be my best recommendation. Other questions on that, or just ways to do that? I know, it's always gonna, listen, you're gonna be drinking from a fire hose for the next 2 to 3 years. And then once you feel like you got it, they'll reauthorize the law and totally change it on you. I remember when I became an education lawyer, I almost didn't because I thought I'd be really bored. If I do the same thing all the time, I'll get so bored. And here I am 19 years later reading the same document over and over going like, do those words mean that? And how does it work in this situation? So you won't be bored.
Okay, next question. This is regarding competitive procurement. So understanding the need for competitive procurement, we understand we have to bid it out. We're talking about services. So just think that these are new directors, so we go into a school system, and I'm setting a scenario because I'm assuming that's what this means. So we're in the school system, they're receiving services from ABC company. They're providing, I don't know, coaching for teachers and administrators or whatever. Clearly above the threshold, so we need to bid it out. We did just that. Is there an acceptable amount that vendor A is, I don't know, $50,000 more than vendor B, but we want to do vendor B? Is there an acceptable amount with a justification? And would a sufficient justification be, we know these people, we've had a relationship with them, they've done this amount of work, we've seen gains, we don't want to switch gears now and go to vendor A and get us off track, and it may or may not work.
All right, so what your procurement rules say is that when I think of procurement, the term we always use is best value, not cheapest. Right? It's always best value, it's not cheapest. Your RFP process should have built in, for example, history of past performance, financial stability, performance background, right? Like, you are absolutely allowed to award points for those things. Because your RFP process is a more formal process, there's usually people that evaluate the RFPs, there's a scoring rubric, all of that should be taken into account. So if the scenario, Molly, you just gave does that, then they should end up with more points than a new vendor that has not worked before, right? Because that history of past performance would be good. Because I don't want you picking a vendor that's cheap who's gonna do a terrible job or has a history of not doing the work for you, right? Or not showing up or not fully performing. So the answer is yes, you can absolutely pick a more expensive vendor, but if you don't justify the why, either because your rubric isn't clear or the way maybe your RFP process works is 3 people look and evaluate it as a group. If you don't explain to me why the more expensive one is a better value for the reasons you gave, continuity of services, history of past performance, etc., what am I going to assume? Your friends, or you're getting kickbacks, or like your, significant other is one of the owners. You should just know, it's like the way my brain works, it's the way the federal grants, Department of Ed, your auditors, all of us go to the same fraud conferences. Like that is what we believe, right? In fact, I'm going to one in September. They will all be there, every major auditing firm. That's what we all think. Like if you can't explain why you paid this company $200,000 more than the other companies that they were bid on, I'm assuming that you're friends or you got money for it. So you want to make sure you're explaining the why. I've never seen an auditor question the why. I've seen auditors question when there is no explanation. All right. So like I said, it's more about just explaining in the decision of why that decision was made. And then of course that evaluation piece will be good too. Are there any other questions? Yes.
Okay, so you were talking about the micro purchases and things like that. So say you get a requisition and it's over the 999,000 or 9,999. Just say it's like for instructional supplies. When you say it's for 13,000, it's instructional supplies and then maybe some Chromebooks or something. Are you saying that that doesn't have to be bidded out since it's considered instructional supplies?
Yeah, so I would need someone from the state to chime in, but it sounds like that would be the Alabama exception of instructional supplies. So would it still be quotes at that point?
Should be.
Yeah, so then you would just need quotes for the instructional supplies, and usually it's 2 or 3 quotes, depending on the amount. It would be 2 quotes, yes, because instructional supplies, yes, I think would include all of that. That is correct. But to be fair, even if it wasn't instructional supplies, from 10,000 to 40 is still quotes. The issue is what we do at 40 or more than that, right? If it's an exception over 40, it's still quotes. That's how you prove the reasonableness. The difference is with a micro purchase, if it's under 10, you don't need more than 1 quote. But I will tell you, if I see quotes coming in at 9,998, I know what you did. You're like, hey, I need this to be under 10 or I have to get quotes. I'm telling you, it's just as easy to get 1 more quote, right? It's really like 2 quotes. 2 quotes and the auditor leaves you alone. Just get another quote. And then you can still say, I'm picking this vendor because they've worked for us for the last 4 years and we're really happy with the performance. No one's ever gonna question that. When I see the 9997, I'm like, come on guys, what's happening here?
But I have to
Yes, ma'am.
I have to chime in on that because I had experience with the district. They wanted to buy something 30,000, and at the state, I was happy. I was like, oh, it's under 40, you can go for it. However, that district had a cutoff of 25,000. So you got to make sure that your board of ed, what they say, because I was happy and they laid it. I was like, oh, 30,000, go ahead and buy it. But their district had that cutoff at 25. So
Always follow the most restrictive rule, which is why like you will have a board sometime caution like, well, we should inventory everything that's over $50. And I'm like, you really want to explain to the board why that may not be recommended. Right? And then you have to do it. Yes.
In a previous experience, sometimes when you're like in a really, really rural area, it is difficult when you start getting in the higher prices to get someone to drive to your district to give you the quote. So in a previous state, we wrote in our policies, we would attempt to get 3 bids based on our proximity of people who could give reputable bids with good companies, whatever those words were. How is that in Alabama? Because I know
It's going to be the same everywhere. So even in another state, You can't say try, that would actually not be compliant, because the law
I'm sure
says.
we didn't use the word try.
All right, well, attempt is the same word, but
Well, give me a lawyer word.
here's my lawyer word, right? Exceptions to quotes is called non-competitive procurement rate, sole sourcing. The bottom one says, after soliciting several sources, competition is deemed inadequate. That means you tried to get quotes and you couldn't get any. And it's on the slide you have, so you don't even have to copy it. I've even given you the section number, it's available online. So my point is, because yes, when you're in a rural area, it might be harder, but that's why we encourage, like, you know, the attempt. If you can show the attempt and you got one response, that is number 5. That is the exception. But I do want to make sure that the attempt was not putting it on the front door of the central office.
What were you buying?
Hey, we're just curious, just to follow up, what were you trying to purchase that somebody would have to come to you to give you a
Okay,
quote?
like, not with our federal, but with like capital outlay projects, that are like, you know, over the 250,000 threshold, and then you're just trying to get people to come in because it's dealing with like your facilities, and they don't wanna, they don't wanna drive in.
But I've heard the same complaint with like related service providers or tutors, and I get all of that. Listen, when in doubt, bid it out,
There you go.
all right? And then if you only get one quote, you've hit the 5th exception. And that's the easy one, as long as you can show, look, here was our RFP, here's our bid, we had it on our website, we put it in our small business thing, we did all these things, we only still got one person. Auditors not gonna question that.
And you talked about having in for paperwork, how long do you keep that for?
Ooh, great question. How long do we keep our paperwork? Literally forever. No, 5 years. 5 years from the end of the fiscal year. And
I
that's
don't know
because
about that.
Oh,
I don't know about that because I'm new. And the auditors asked me about something that was from 2019, and I'm just thankful that I don't tear up offices because I've got previous experiences. But she asked me for something that was federal, that would have been 2000.
Do you remember what it was?
Certainly can. She asked me that when COVID happened in 2019,
Yeah.
did our school district provide a letter to the private schools offering them the COVID money? She just asked me that in March of this year, so that's more than 5 years, am I right?
No,
No, that's
that's 1920
20,
years, so that's
21.
within 5 years.
Oh, they consider 19, okay, because I'm.
Because it's 5 years from the end, that's what I just said, 5 years from the end of the fiscal year,
Okay,
which either goes 7 from the beginning or 5 from the end. Because remember, it's 2 years.
okay.
Initial year, carryover year. So however you want to do it, 7 years from the first day or 5 years from the last day.
7 is what
There you go, done.
Thank you.
Trust me, it's fine. Okay, well, with that, good luck to you. Thank you guys for having me. I do really wish you the best of luck. I hopefully will see you all again soon, but not too soon. And have a great year of sports. I think you guys started this year, so thank you for having me.
So we're gonna pick up kind of where Jennifer left off yesterday afternoon, in reference to the consolidated application. Before I get started, do you all have any questions that you wanna ask regarding yesterday's activity? Something maybe you learned in the breakout session, was that helpful? Maybe you thought about this all last night, couldn't sleep because you couldn't wait to get here to ask this particular question. Anything you wanna ask or need clarification on before moving forward?
I'll ask the question, because I'm not sure if it'll show up on the agenda, and I did put it in the parking lot, but will there be, do you share any insight about flexing personnel, dues, don'ts, and implications for federal programs?
Don't flex if you're gonna come back with title. Don't flex. You mean like flex state units?
Yes.
Amanda's gonna talk about S&S this afternoon, supplement not supplant, but the rule of thumb, if you flex outside of your building, you can't come back with federal funds to supplement.
But flexing, but reallocating a unit within a building?
Oh, yes. Now, when you're counting units in a building, we just count units. We don't count, we look at the total amount allocated from the state to make sure that total amount of units is in that building. Whether you have a librarian, or that may be state required, but like an AP or whatever number of teachers, maybe you want to take a teacher and use them as an instructional coach, that's flexibility. As long as that unit remained in that building, you're totally fine to do so. Okay. All right, any other questions? Hearing none, we'll get started. Okay, so we're going to pick up on section 9 of the consolidated application checklist, where we're going to talk about PPA, go over some rules of thumb for you as you are PPAing out those funds. And who can tell me what PPA stands for? Very good. Give yourself a hand. Yay. Yeah, literally give yourself a hand. Yeah, you gotta cheer when you can. Okay, so yes, PPA is per pupil allocation, and that's section 9 of the application, and we're gonna jump right in there. And here are the rules of thumb for PPA when you're allocating those school funds. So just kind of recap, we talked about set-asides yesterday. So your entire application, you're gonna do one of two things. You're gonna either set aside for your district initiatives, or you're gonna PPA them out, or a combination of both. Okay, so we talked about those required set-asides and then those optional set-asides. Now, today is how do we get money to the school? And that's through our PPA allocation. So, in choosing how you're going to distribute funds to your schools, your LEA may use one or more of these rules. Okay? The 75% rule. Important. Every school with a 75% or higher poverty rate must be served by the Title I program, regardless of the school's grade span. So that means if a school's poverty percentage is 75% or higher, it's not an option, that school must be served, okay? That's important when you consider CEP, whether you add the multiplier or not. How many of you was there in your position long enough and you received the email from Jennifer Cannell this year about determining if you're going to use the multiplier or not? Okay, you will have that option and you'll learn more about, and so that's probably about 10% of you, 10-15%. So a lot of you just came in and a decision was made, okay? So you'll receive that notification every year until we update EGAP, where this can be done as a process that's already embedded in our EGAP program. So basically, if you decide to use the multiplier, that multiplier is used towards that poverty percentage, and more than likely toward the direct CERT poverty percentage, let me just say that, as opposed to your free and reduced lunch numbers. But more than likely, applying that multiplier will get most of your schools over that 75% poverty, so that's something you kind of want to pay attention to when making that selection, whether you want to have to serve these schools or not serve the school. Our next rule is the 125% rule. Now, if a district chooses to serve any schools with the poverty rate below the 35% threshold, remember, the schools have to be at least 35% or higher poverty in order to be served under title. But if you have a school that's below that 35% threshold and you want to serve that particular school, all served schools must receive an amount per low-income child equal to at least 125% of the per pupil allocation for the district as a whole. So you're wondering, how do I get to that number? And keep in mind, this calculation must be done before any set-asides or any reservations are taken off. So if there is a school that falls below that 35% threshold and you want to serve that school, you have the option, as long as that school's poverty percentage doesn't drop below the district's poverty percentage. But when that happens, EGAP will automatically kick in 125% rule. And what that means is, before any set-asides is taken off, we have to PPA out an allocation to the school, and the school must receive their fair portion. Now, the calculations are done for you when the 125% rule kicks in on the building eligibility page. At the top right-hand corner, you all are given a number. You're given a number whether the rule kicks in or not. The number that you see, that is your per pupil allocation recommendation, okay? You're not required to give that dollar amount unless the 125% rule is in place. How many of you know what I'm talking about? That per pupil allocation number that's at the top right-hand corner of that building eligibility page? Yes. Now, if you want to just use that particular number when serving, you're more than welcome to do so. However, it doesn't leave a whole lot of money left for the reservations. But we kind of reverse that role. Typically, all of your set-asides and reservations are budgeted first on the set-aside page, and then it reverts you to the building eligibility page for your, to PPA out those funds. You would do the opposite. The PPA, I'm mixing two pages, sorry. I'm mixing the building eligibility page and the PPA page. But typically, the set-aside page is completed first. After the set-aside page, you complete the PPA page. If the 125% rule is in effect, you have to complete the PPA page, and whatever funding amount that's left after that required amount is given to each of those schools, that's the amount that you have to use for the, that you have left for the reservation page. And so keep in mind, there are factors that you have to adhere to, like if you $500,000 or more, you still have to do parent and family engagement requirement. Also, homeless is a required set aside. So those two things must come off the top after you've done your PPA page. So that's something to think about if you really are considering serving a school that falls below the 35% threshold. Our next option, a rule to remember, is grade span grouping. Grade span grouping is an option once all schools with the 75% poverty percentage or higher has been served. So after you've served all of your schools that are 75% poverty or higher, then you can rank schools and serve them by grade span, rather than just in strict poverty order. Next one is your small district exception. Districts with fewer than 1,000 students enrolled or with only one school in each grade span do not have to rank eligible schools in poverty order. You don't have to follow the poverty order if your district has fewer than 1,000 students. I think we maybe have 3 in the state with fewer than 1,000 students in the entire district. Okay? Next, your high schools. Under ESSA, a district may prioritize its high schools with a poverty rate of at least 50%, which means a high school with a poverty rate of 50% may be served before an elementary school with a higher poverty percentage. Okay? Any questions? Okay, the PPA list is utilized to determine your per pupil allocation to those schools. The LEA selected as school-wide or TA on the building eligibility page. The district has discretion in determining the per pupil allocation unless you are in the 125% rule. Title I schools must be served in rank order. That means the higher the poverty, the higher the PPA. Does not necessarily mean they're going to have a higher allocation. What determines that allocation? The PPA times what? Student enrollment. So that is a factor when determining the actual overall allocation. So we're looking at the dollar amount that we're giving to each school per student. The LEA must provide the highest ranked poverty school with more or equal funding to the amount given to the other served schools. Questions? Okay. If schools are not served in strict rank order, is it due to one of the following? So we're gonna check these, this is how we are checking the application. So the rules that I just went over, if you're not serving your schools in the strict rank order, is it because the LEA has less than 1,000 students? Remember, if the answer is yes, you don't have to follow the poverty percentage. The LEA has one school per grade span. If that's the case, you don't have to follow the strict rank order. The LEA has chosen to allocate funds based on grade span grouping. Or the LEA has chosen to skip a school based on the skipping provisions. Those are the only reasons why schools should not be served in strict rank order. LEAs must explain the rationalization for serving schools outside of rank order in the history law. And that's just the key. That's one of the things that when we're reviewing the application, we're looking to see, okay, are these schools served in strict rank order? Yes or no. If not, we go right to the history log to see if there's a reason. And most of the time, if you're not doing so, it's due to grade span grouping. And when you are telling us, okay, we are grade span grouping, we're prioritizing elementary school. After elementary school, middle school is the next highest need, followed by secondary. But it doesn't have to be in that particular order. You may choose to prioritize your middle schools. That may be your targeted area, so you're serving them first. You're giving your middle schools a higher PPA than your other elementary and high schools, with the exception of what?
The ones over 75.
Very good. The ones over 75, because they have to be served first, and then we can follow that particular grade span grouping order. Which is the last bullet. Okay, here's a screenshot from your checklist. And just kind of gives you the flow in which we are, once we're reviewing your applications, what we're looking for. And this is just a good rule of thumb for you to have or for you to check before submitting your application to make sure that your application is in compliance. Okay, schools with 100% poverty and marked as CEP on the building eligibility page may receive the same amount, the same PPA amount. If not, the LEA may use the actual poverty percentage to determine rank order. I'll talk about that in just a minute. No, actually, let me talk about that now. Okay, so on the building eligibility page, if the multiplier is added, a lot of times once the multiplier is added, it sends the poverty percentage over 100%. If you're deciding to give all of your schools the same amount, the same dollar amount per student, and they're all over 100%, totally fine, but that's not always the case. You don't have to do that. If you decide, okay, I'm going to still rank based on my highest needs, and I'm going to give them a different amount, you have to go back to the actual poverty percentage of those schools to determine their PPA. For instance, that means you have to go back before the multiplier and look at their direct cert percentages and rank based on their actual poverty. You can't just randomize a PPA just because they're all over 100%. You still have to ensure that it's in rank order by going back to that original poverty percentage that's any gap and determine that PPA based off that that school's actual poverty percentage. Any questions?
Doesn't it defaults already in rank order?
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
unless you have put in a number for the sort
For
order.
the sort order, right. And if you want to change the ranking based on grade span and all of those things, then of course you have to make that adjustment. All right, next. If the LEA receives an allocation of $500,000 or more, the amount listed as the 90% portion of the 1% parent and family engagement funds on the PPA page must be equal to or exceed the number amount calculated for each school on the parent and family engagement worksheet. And I know someone was working yesterday and had a question about that particular worksheet, but on the parent and family engagement worksheet, you're able to download that particular worksheet and enter your schools individually, and it will do the calculations for you. And you want to compare those to whatever numbers you receive from whomever you received it from. I don't remember who I was talking to yesterday, but that worksheet does actually enter the calculations. Once you enter the numbers, it will calculate that percentage for you. All right, so the last bullet here on the PPA page, the remaining balance must be as close to zero as possible, but it cannot exceed 5 and it cannot be a red or negative number. So you want to make sure once your PPA out your funds and you had your parent and family engagement amount allocated to your school, that bottom amount, ultimately the goal is for it to be 0, but definitely cannot be negative and cannot exceed $5 or more. Okay, here's a snapshot of the checklist. All right, now we're going into the Title I budget. We spent some time here a little yesterday, and this is section 11 of the checklist. We did spend a little time here yesterday, but we're going to actually go through the process of reviewing some budget narratives so that you can see what those should look like. You'll have the opportunity to review budget narratives that has been approved and not approved, and how to make those necessary corrections. Now, districts must illustrate how set-aside activities are aligned to help the district meet the challenging state academic standards. So, going back to the set-aside page, when determining if an activity is a district initiative, whether it should be PPA'd out or your district level activity. For it to be on the set-aside page or a district level activity, whatever the activity is must have a goal, a district level goal attached to it. There is no reserving funds at the district level for just in case. The plan should clearly indicate if and what activities are considered district level and school level. A lot of times we are called and asked how can a narrative be worded if we just need to reserve funds at the district levels just in case we're thinking about doing this PD or we're thinking about doing X, Y, and Z. Our response to you is based on your needs assessment. You have to go back to the needs assessment to determine the overall need, because there is no filler. Our goal is to have a zero-based budget. There is no filler and there is no holding it here in this particular line item at the district level for just to see, or for teachers to determine what professional development they want to attend. All right, next bullet. The budget narrative must identify the set-aside and explain how the activity and expenditure addresses the LEA's needs to help meet the district's Title I goal. Your narrative description should include the following: if it's salaries, the personnel, the number of positions, and the FTEs, materials and supplies. There should be a detailed description of what's being purchased. And for purchase services, be sure to include personnel if applicable, but also the details to describe the services that's being purchased. Here are a good rule of thumb, some questions that you should ask yourself to ensure that your narrative is clear and descriptive. What type of items are being purchased? How many items are being purchased? What activities are being funded? Who will participate in the activities? What students are being targeted for the services? When will the actual activities occur? Are services being contracted, which is a 300? If so, through whom? And what specific professional development activity and how many participants are projected to participate? Okay, now, we're gonna get into the part where we're actually gonna go through some budget narratives, and I want to show you how we, at the LEA and SEA level, are looking to make sure your budgets match what's on the set-aside page in particular. So, when you're writing your original budget, we have to be able to distinguish between what are you budgeting for the set-aside page and what in that narrative is PPA. Okay, so it's easy, obviously, when we're looking on the set-aside page to be able to say, okay, this PD is set aside for this amount, but you also have to describe that particular activity in your budget narrative. And we need to be able to determine the difference between the professional development that's occurring at the district level and the professional development that is occurring at the school level. So what we ask that you do is ensure that all activities that are budgeted on the set-aside page are properly labeled in your budget narrative. And it's very simple to do. All we need you to do is for your district level activities, is just in the budget narrative, label them district initiative or professional development. District initiative, set aside district initiative, other set aside district initiative, professional development. So kind of just telling us what particular line item you are explaining in that particular budget narrative. So let's look at the example above. The top left-hand corner is a other district initiative, which is at the bottom of the set-aside page. You're telling us that for your other district initiative, you will host a district-wide summer school program, will be provided for all of your Title I schools to improve academic achievement in reading and math. That's great. That particular box on the set-aside page, really, you don't have to tell us that much. It could be simply a district-wide summer school program in the dollar amount. Because sometimes there are multiple activities that's going on as an other district initiative. The description comes in the budget narrative, okay? So, we know that when we're reviewing your application, we need to be able to identify this other district initiative within your budget narrative. So here at the bottom, you have your budget line item and your narrative description. And in particular, this is a summer school program or after school program, so it's coded as function code 9130, which is your extended day or dependent care activities. And in the narrative, it has been labeled as set aside other district initiative that correlates identically to the district initiative that's outlined on the set aside page. Now, if you would notice for this particular area, the salaries amount is like $3,300 and something, $3,000 something dollars. That's not the full $5,000. So that lets the specialist know that the remaining amount should be budgeted somewhere else. It's probably gonna be in function code, $200, $299 for benefits. Then also there could be some in 400 object code for materials and supplies to run that program. So what I want to point out here, for one expenditure or for one line item on a set-aside page, could be documented in 4 different places within a budget narrative. That's why it's important to clearly label the budget narrative so that we can easily identify that dollar amount for that particular line item on the set-aside page. And sometimes that doesn't always happen, and it makes it hard for us to balance the budget, and then we have to give you a call or send the application back because we're able to identify a portion of it, but not the entire dollar amount, because things are not clearly labeled. And as you submit your application, it gets a little bit more complicated because you then have to start identifying what? Carryover. Because carryover is also added to the budget narrative. But let me also point out something here with the narrative description. So a portion, the other district initiative is outlined here clearly for us. What about the hourly pay for extended day tutors? Is that a district initiative?
Not labor.
It's not labeled, so that automatically tells us that it's what? It's for a school. So a particular school will be paying that dollar amount. And typically, it will explain to us hourly pay for extended day tutors, this amount for school X, Y, and Z. Or it may have been collectively for from all the schools will have a portion, but the federal programs director put a collective amount there, and then he would say hourly pay for extended day tutors for all Title I schools, and then that dollar amount. So that automatically tells us that's coming from PPA. And then here, well, that's the continuation, I'm sorry, of the narrative where they did tell us we anticipate salaries for 3 to 4 teachers from NC to provide extended day tutoring during the 22-23 school year for grades 9, what does it say? So 4, 9 through 12 teachers. I can't read all of that. It's blurred out for, the names of those schools. They are taken out. But anyways, that tells me there that particular dollar amount, the $9,120 is coming from PPA from those schools that are participating in this particular summer activity. Any questions? And that will look the same for each of those set-aside items that are on the set-aside page that you choose to budget for the district initiative. Okay, so here's another example for the set-aside budget narrative. Keep in mind, the expenditures listed on the set-aside page must match the budget narrative, and they should be properly labeled. And here are some of the labels that are typically used. Set-aside. If it's an amendment without carryover, you just name Amendment 1, Amendment 2, whatever your change is. Do you have to go in and really delete anything? No, you don't have to delete anything. You can adjust the dollar amount for a particular item. For instance, you can say, I'm amending this item to be whatever it is. But you always want to label the amendments, label the set aside, and label the carryover. Okay, let's look here at the bottom. Set aside parent and family engagement. So that automatically tells me this particular budget item is from the set aside page, and it's from the line item parent and family engagement. Funds reserved for parent and family engagement shall be used to carry out activities and strategies consistent with our district parent and family engagement policy. Materials and supplies for that dollar amount are allocated for the parent outreach software and materials and supplies needed for the parent meetings and activities. So that's a description of what that particular dollar amount is used for, and it tells me that it's set aside and it's for all the schools within the district to meet the district's requirement for parent and family engagement. Also in this line item, you can see how each school is broken out, their dollar amount and what they are purchasing. Does it have to say PPA? No, we automatically know. If it's not specified as set aside, then it's for PPA, okay? Now, here's another one that's added in this same budget line item, set aside for homeless. That the reason, a clear description of what those funds are being used for, and the same with neglected and delinquent. So all of those set-asides are outlined for us, and they are properly labeled, so we have no problem with going back to the set-aside page to match that dollar amount to ensure that it's been properly budgeted in the budget narrative. All right, so here are some examples of things that will be approved and not approved, and this is so important in getting your application approved the first time, because that's our goal. This is just an example for salaries. something that was submitted that would not be approved is summer school salaries. What is missing here? The number of personnel, what else? The FTEs, a clear description. Is summer school salaries a clear description? No. Okay, so let's look at the right side. The right side is an example of all the information that should be listed in the budget narrative. Doesn't mean it needs to be a dissertation. 2 sentences is enough to give us exactly what we need. The description, the summer school program will target reading and math intervention skills to support students' academic achievement in Title I schools. That's all their Title I schools. How many personnel? How many personnel? 6, because we have 5 teachers and 1 instructional coach. How many FTEs? Why is it no FTEs? Why are there no FTEs? Summer school, right? It's a stipend, remember? If it's a stipend, we don't have to list it as an FTE because no portion of their salary is coming from this particular expenditure. Only an additional stipend for doing the work. Any questions? Okay, next, here we are. Title I purchase services are allocated for instructional services, printing and binding, and services for homeless student needs. Is this right? How much are we purchasing? How much is allocated for binding? Printing? What about for homeless? How are we gonna go match that to the set aside page? Okay, let's look on the right hand side. We properly labeled. So now we're knowing who's praying for printing and binding and where the homeless allocation is coming from, which is the set aside page. So, do we have a clear description? Yes. And we need a clear description for one item or both? Both of those purchases. Does it identify the item or the service that will be provided?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And what about the amount budgeted?
Yes.
Right. Okay. Any questions here? I'm trying to speed up. I know I could get talking forever, but I really want you to understand, I'm test your knowledge in just a few minutes, so now's the time to ask any questions. Okay, here's an example for 400, same process. Supplemental supplies and materials for the Summer Bridge program. Summer Bridge program for who? Is one school having this, or is the district having it? Is multiple schools having this? No. So let's look at our correct narrative. District set aside is going to be on the other. Supplemental materials and supplies is the service for who? For ABC High School and XYZ Middle School students attending the Summer Bridge program. Materials and supplies include what? ACT workbooks and study guides for the dollar amount of, right. So that's what I should see on the set-aside page. You can work together in your group to kind of work. The goal is for you to read through the budget narrative that's provided and tell me, would you approve this or would you not approve this? And if you choose not to approve it, how would you support, what information would you give yourself to make the correction? Don't tell me what's wrong, how to make it right. Go. Okay, so let's look at the first one. What table wants to take number 1? I can't do all the talking today, I'm out. No, just there. Okay, right here we go. Okay, so you would approve or not approve? Not approve, who agreed? Okay, who would approve it? Awesome, tell us why. Why you didn't approve it?
Because there was no amount, dollar amount.
Okay, no amount budgeted. How would you make the correction? Mhm. Okay. What function code are we talking about?
1,100.
1100, so we should have, is FTEs present?
Yeah, for their salaries, 110.
Uh-huh. Okay, so we have the number of interventionists, so the number of people, the FTEs are there. What else has to be there? The dollar amount is not there. And what about a description?
You know what schools and what subject,
Okay,
more detailed description.
a little bit more detail. Because to help improve student achievement in what areas? Are we talking about reading? Are we talking about math? And, so just a little bit more detail. So here is what I have. Funds will be utilized to employ 13 interventionists at 7.83 FTEs to supplement the educational program of Title I schools. These positions will enhance student math and language arts achievement to provide, by providing one-to-one or small group intervention to students whose data indicates they are not achieving at the minimum proficiency level or higher. Okay?
I have a question.
Yes.
Microphone.
If this,
And then the schools are listed.
all right, well, the schools are listed because this says the LEA is paying for it.
Mhm.
So would that not be a district initiative, is that a set aside?
I don't know.
That's why I wanted to ask the question, because
But
it
that's what
says
you would
the
tell
LEA.
But
So
on
that's just a
my
question.
answer, it's PPA'd out, because I said schools impacted and it listed the 3 names of the school. But you have to tell me, is this a district initiative? If it is, did we label it? So that would be a correction that needs to be made if you opted for it to be a district initiative. But in my example, my feedback is PPA. Yes.
So if it was a district initiative, it would have in bold print or something before the narrative even begins, district set aside. And then you would, that's how you identify whether or not it's a district initiative. So with it not being there, it is PPA'd out into a building.
Right. My example, my answer is PPA out because I didn't. But,
That's why you
Vicky
have to be
pointed
clear,
out,
cause we don't know.
you could have corrected it by labeling it as another district initiative, as a set aside other district initiative. Still would have been correct.
Yeah.
And did you need to label your schools then? Not necessarily, because it's for our school students throughout the district. So you can kind of see how if you submit it to us in its original format, it kind of leaves us in limbo to assume, and I don't assume anything. So that's just what, those kind of things we want to point out. All right, number 2, or the second item. Funds will be used for instructional purchase service. Who wants to take it? Somebody, come on, anybody. Who can do this? Smart group.
I said no, I would not approve it.
Okay.
I question, there is no description of the service. Who are we targeting, or what students or what content areas are we targeting is missing? Which schools are being supported by this? Is it a district set aside district initiative or a school initiative? All of those things are missing.
Very good.
My goodness.
And also look at this. Funds will be used for instructional purposes. It can be a combination. We don't know. I mean, is the 17,500 all for one thing? Could it be for multiple things? So, here is my correction. A third-party company will be used to provide substitute teachers at Title I schools to support absences by Title I funded faculty and staff. This is not a district initiative, and that amount is $7,500. So each school, although we're contracting, each school is paying into this because it depends on how many Title I teachers they have in their school. Okay? The other 10,500 funds will be used to contract, with a third party to offer tutoring services for all students in grades K-12 at Title I schools to reinforce academic support to core subjects, set aside other district initiatives. Okay. Number 3. Who wants to take the third? Approved or not? Not. What are we missing?
FTEs.
No FTEs, what else?
The need for what their focus will be,
I didn't hear you.
the need, and what their focus will be.
Okay, a description that includes the focus and the need, the schools, identify the schools, and
Are they full-time,
Are
part-time?
they full-time or part-time? Yeah.
right, the FTEs. Because if it's 0, that tells me that part-time will indicate part-time, but there should be a percentage of their salary being paid from this fund source. Is it one whole FTE? Is it point, how many FTEs? So we know the amount of the portion of the salary that's coming from this fund source, okay? So, while we're not asking for a lot, maybe 2 to 3 sentences, the information you provide is really important. And right now, it's a no-brainer, but let me just say this, when you're in your districts and you're working, a lot of this information you know in your head automatically. And you are writing, you just assume that you are including important information that you kind of overlook. And once it gets to us, it's like, we abbreviate names or summer school program, we call them RISE, whatever, and we're like, what is this? What does this mean? You know, we can't figure out this small things because it's automatic to you, it's so familiar to you. And that is what we want you to keep in mind. What's familiar to you when you're writing your budget narratives is not familiar to us. And while sometimes we can read between the lines and assume things, we do not. If I can't prove it, that's not what it says, okay? And we don't want to have to send anything back if we don't have to, all right? So just be mindful. The last example, approve or not? No, because I gave this example in one of the narratives that was up here. So this definitely would not be approved. We're missing the dollar amount, we're missing the schools, and we're missing a clear description of what would be purchased. And this was the answer to that particular. Right here, that was the answer. All right, any questions? All right, so before we go to lunch, we're gonna go through the school-wide details really quick. And then we're gonna go into our breakout sessions, because we have 4 more groups that we want you to break out into and have a discussion. We're not going to be there very long, and then we're going to break for lunch. So just bear with me just a little bit longer, okay? So the next section that we're gonna review is our school-wide detail page, which we talked about this briefly on yesterday, and here at the bottom is a screenshot of what it looks like. So on the school-wide detail page is where you're going to indicate the total number of people filling the positions with that particular fund source. So that's a collection of whether they are district set aside, whether they're school-based, how many full-time personnel that how many people, period, whether they're full-time or not. They're not part-time, but whether they're full-time FTE, we'll deal with that in just a minute. But how many people are being hired using this particular fund source? Right now, it's Title I, but it can be any fund source because each program have their own school-wide detail page that this information should be included. So next, the FTEs, the percentage of the time that one person is working for the purpose of the grants. And so you would just include the collective FTEs on this particular line item in the school-wide detail page. Next is all federal FTEs must be programmatically approved, which means once you plan and write your budget, you should only be paying the salaries of the individuals that are included in your plan. You should not be paying the salary of any employee that has not been programmatically approved. All right, another thing to remember, at year end, if you have salaries paid from federal funds that are not in EGAP, you must just revise the EGAP, or just revise the EGAP so we won't have to reallocate. And I'll just leave that at that. Make sure all of the personnel that's being paid with federal funds that's paid out of Title I, whatever title program, are listed in EGAP. If they are not, then that makes them unallowable. And when Edward and his team comes out, they're unallowed. It's an unallowable item, which you would have to recode that, okay? Keep in mind, your application is a plan. And if it's a plan, what does that mean? Things change. And as soon as they change, what should we do? Update the plan. And I know your CSFOs are sticklers about, hey, you only get 2 revisions. That's not our rule, okay? You can revise that plan as many times as far as EGAP. Now, I'm not talking about Methalir and their system and what they have to get approved by the board. And I understand that. So that's the difference there. So you do want to consult your CSFO, and also ask them for the budget analysis report and the various reports that they have from their accounting system to ensure that that particular report is matching what you have in EGAP, because you all should work hand in hand to remain in compliance throughout the year, not just the monitoring season. All right, part-time personnel, that's also listed on the school-wide details page, and that's just the total number count. Just remember here that part-time personnel is not the same as your stipend employees. Part-time are those who are working during the school day that gets paid dollar amount per hour. They come in like your tutors, things of that nature. All right, more general reminders regarding the school-wide detail page. The number of personnel and FTEs paid with Title I school-wide funds listed in the school-wide detail page must match what is in the budget narrative. So although you may have them itemized by function code in that budget narrative, collectively that number should match what is on the school-wide detail page. The number and description of part-time personnel must match as well. The subject areas, grade grouping that are served, and delivery methods should be selected. So if you're targeting reading and math throughout, then those areas should be targeted. If you're not targeting science anywhere within the application, should we be select science? No, those areas that you're targeting should be identified based on what is on the school-wide detail page, and it should match the budget narrative. If the LEA's allocation is over $5,000, you want to be sure that the district parent and family engagement activities and the estimated costs listed at the bottom on the school-wide details page must be consistent with the description of the 10% of the 1% allocation activities in the budget narrative. So the bottom of the school-wide detail page, the district portion plus what goes to the school combined should equal what's on the set-aside page. All right, just general programmatic admin costs. With Title I, just keep in mind that your admin plus indirect costs cannot exceed 15% of the budget. And here are your admin caps for various programs. For Title II, 5%, Title III, 2%, and Title V is 5%.
These regions still have not gone to see Angela Russell, who's back in the back.
she's keeping up with this. So if you're here and you're from one of these regions, please make sure you go see her before you leave today so she can talk to you about your carryover balances. And I'm going to talk to you about the consolidated application look for or one pagers. This is in your notebooks. It should be, I think it's the third handout that's in your notebooks. This is kind of an informal document that all of the ALSDE specialists created together to help us review your applications. It's sort of like the checklist, but not quite as formal as the checklist. But please know when you're reading it, the notes are meant for a specialist who is actually going through the applications, and so it doesn't necessarily apply to work that you're doing, but it enables you to see the work that we're doing and what we're looking for. One nice thing about it is it has the allowable activities, a list of the allowable activities for each title within the document, and then after that, it just has a list of specific things for the specialist to be looking for when they're checking the application. Most of those things for Title I have already been gone over with you by Flandra or Jennifer. So I'm skipping Title I, I'm not going to focus on it, but I'm going to focus on the other titles and just some of those look-fors that are important as you're doing your continuation applications. All right, so we're going to start with Title I, Part C, Migrant. The specialist over migrant is Becky Wilson, and this really applies to all of them. We want to make sure that the budgeted items reflect the needs assessment on the application details page. But this is specifically talking about when the application details page, when the needs assessment is incorporated in the application details with this specific title. Up to 5% of the Title 1C budget can be allocated for general administration, so we have to look for that. And then when we get to the application details page, there's specific things that we look for. So for the needs assessment, we want to make sure that there is a description of the process and summary, and that it includes pre-K, elementary, secondary, and out-of-school youth, migrant student populations. So we want to make sure that we have to look to make sure that all of those youth are mentioned in that needs assessment. When we get to staff summary, core areas, grade group served, and type of program, we need to look to make sure that it matches what it says in the needs assessment at the top of the page. And then under the staff summary, of course, we want to make sure, this really goes across the board for all the titles, we want to make sure that what's in the needs assessment matches what's in the budget when it comes to the number of personnel and the number of FTEs. Also, for the program management information assurance, we need to make sure that it's been checked. And in looking at the list of evidence-based programs, we want to make sure that those do align with the needs assessment and do address the needs of migrant students. And then finally, in the part that talks about the summary of service delivery, the SDP, it should clearly describe services being provided to migrant students. Again, we would look to see that it specifically mentions pre-K, elementary, secondary, and OSY, and it should be supplemental. It should explain how it's supplemental to the core academic program, how it aligns with the needs identified in the needs assessment, and then finally, it also has to describe how the LEA will prioritize services to migratory children that are identified as priority for services, PFS. Okay, so when we're checking your application, this is a nice little list to remind us of the specific things that we need to be looking for. So as you're writing these things, this is a tool that you can go look at and make sure that you've included all the parts that we're going to be looking for. All right, Title I, Part D, neglected and delinquent. This is handled by Jennifer Adams. Where's Jennifer? She's back there in the back, okay. For Title I, Part D, of course, again, you want to make sure that all narratives related to personnel include, or in this case, we want to make sure that your narratives include the location, position names, and number of personnel and FTEs. So this is one where we actually have you make sure you put the location of where the people are going to be working and the position names. The LEA can support a Title I delinquent facility with Title I-D funds. However, the facility receives the services only and not the funds. Funds can also be used to support eligible LEA at-risk programs that serve specific at-risk populations. So this is what we're looking for in the narratives when it comes to Title I-D. Under the related documents, all the Title I-D served facilities are required to have a formal service agreement that's been signed and dated. Of course, that needs to be uploaded in EGAP under the related documents section. And then copies of the facility's most current license and/or charter must be uploaded in EGAP. And when we check those, we want to make sure that the Title I eligible facilities are chartered as a correctional facility or licensed by the Alabama Department of Youth Services. So we're looking to make sure that those documents state that they're one or the other. Okay. Title II, Part A. This is Faith Gaucher is now over Title II. And we're going to be looking for class size reduction. You know, or hopefully y'all know this, or some of you are brand new, so you may not know this. This is another one with class size reduction. You have to be very specific of the things that you put in both the narrative, and you have to complete a Title II class size reduction teacher effectiveness form. That form has to be uploaded under the related documents under Title II, and the narrative and the budget should match what's on the form. And this is what both of those need to include. So you have to, again, have the school, the grade level, the content area or course name, the original student-teacher ratio, and the new student-teacher ratio. So what was the student-teacher ratio before you added that class size reduction teacher, and what is it going to be once you've added that person? All right. Then you also have to have a rationale or an academic reason to justify the need for a class size reduction unit. And this reasoning has to be evidence-based. So you can't just say you're hiring a class size reduction teacher to reduce the class size or because the classes are too big. That's not good enough. We need an evidence-based reasoning as to why this class size reduction teacher is needed. Okay? And then that form has to be signed by your district HR director, your district Title II director, and your superintendent. And that form, that when they sign that, they're verifying that the teachers that you have hired to serve in those class size reduction positions are highly qualified, and you have evidence and data to support that they are effective classroom teachers. So it can't be a brand new teacher, it needs to be someone who has a history of being effective in the classroom. All right, just as a reminder, you cannot use Title II funds for materials and supplies that are for anything other than professional development. I still see this in applications all the time. You cannot purchase classroom supplies and materials using Title II. So you need to be very specific in your narrative. If you talk about purchasing supplies and materials, you need to make sure that you put in that narrative that you're purchasing those things for the purpose of professional development, to use during professional development, okay? If you don't say that, we have to assume that you're using it for something else, and you'll probably have your application returned. On the application's detail page, the breakdown of funds under the allowable activity section should be equal to the amounts and descriptions found within the budget narratives, okay? So when you say that expenses are being used for certain categories, we have to go in and check to make sure that match what you put in your budget narrative. And that includes your equitable services. So Title II is what for those of you who do equitable services in your LEAs, Title II is probably the most common one that you deal with. And so you do need to make sure that you're including those in your narratives. And again, that's what this next bullet says. So anything that they have in their consolidated equitable services plan should match what you put into your budget narrative under 9200, which is for equitable services for private schools, okay? All right, Title III English learners. This is, the specialist for this is Becky Wilson, who is over here. Should have pointed her out earlier. All right, so for Title III, all narratives related to personnel should include, again, the location, the position, names, number of personnel, and the FTEs. Make sure that if you're paying for any teachers, they have to be supplemental to the core ESL program. And you have to provide justification of how they're supplemental, okay? So it's always like a red flag. As soon as we see that you're using Title III funds to pay for personnel, you need to be very specific in how that personnel is supplemental to your core program, okay? You can't hire someone with Title III funds that's part of your core program because that is a requirement, because that's required by the state, by the feds for you to hire that person. So because of that, that wouldn't be supplemental. So you have to say how this person is supplemental to your core program. All right, just as a reminder, you're allowed to utilize up to 2% of the Title III funds for general administration. And if you are receiving an immigrant subgrant, the expenditures must be explicitly identified in the budget narrative and should be recorded using the special use code 0073. Okay? All right, for the application details portion, there must be amounts allocated for all three areas, which should correspond with the amounts and descriptions of activities in the budget narratives. And then for private school services, if you have any, they should match the activities in the Consolidated Equitable Services Plan and anything that you have budgeted under 9200. And then under your related documents, all LEAs have to have an EL plan, whether they receive Title III funds or not. Okay, so the EL plan should be completed not in the Title III section, but it's under the improvement planning section, and under that section, under the related documents for improvement planning is now where you're going to be uploading your EL plan cover sheet and signature page. Okay? All right, for Title V Part B, rural low income, there's not a whole lot of specific things to look for here. But our specialist is Tatum Northington. I don't think she's here. Oh, no, she is here. Right here. Tatum, sorry. I know you were here yesterday, so I wasn't sure if you were here today too. And I talked to you earlier. I don't know. I lose my mind every now and then. All right, and so basically saying basic rules apply here as other programs. And we just wanted to point out that you can use up to 5% of funds for general administrative. And that's it. So anybody have any questions about any of those things that we discussed, talked about for any of the titles? Okay, so that is just a resource that you can use or not use, but it may be helpful after while you're writing your application or after you've written your application, just to make sure that you've included all the things that we look for when we're checking your applications. Try to get it approved the first time.
Hello, everyone. I am Dana Williams, and I did not come to be in front of you with games or any fun activities, or what did Tiffany say earlier? No fun, no flair.
No food, no flair.
No fun, no, I have none of that, okay? So I'm sorry, but I will only be before you briefly, so you can get to Brittany, who has the flair, okay? I'm glad I'm going before her and not after her. But I am here to give you a very brief overview of the ACIP. So let's talk about that. But first I have a few questions. How many of you know principals who go into work only to meet and greet the problems of the day? Raise your hand. You know those principals who just go to work to deal with problems? Because we all know it happens, right? Before you get out your car, there are problems. How many of you know principals who just plan to get through the day? Right? Just got to get through it. How many of you were those principals? I'm raising my hand, right? How many of you have created plans in your mind and wondered why nothing ever got done? Right? You have a plan, but it didn't turn out the way you expected it. It's not working. And then you get a phone call to go into an all-day meeting that you
that was not on your calendar, right? So that plan goes where? It is trash quickly. Exactly. And then how many of you wonder why, as federal programs director, you're sitting here learning about ACIPs? Especially when Dr. Calandra Hawkins and Tiffany has given you so many other things that you really need to concern yourself with, other than the ACIP, right? I know you don't want to raise your hand, but you have to be a part of this team. So let's go through this quickly. You do play an important role in the ACIP. It's because you're the expert now. Even though you may have just started a couple of months ago, you are now considered the expert on federal dollars. So lucky you. Congratulations. So what is the ACIP? It's not a plan that's in your mind. It's not a plan to just get through the day. It's not a plan just for the sake of saying, I did it, now let me get to the other stuff that I have to deal with for compliance monitoring because Dr. Williams is coming in the spring and I gotta get this taken care of. That's not what it is. So the ACIP is a framework designed to enhance the effectiveness, efficiency, and the outcomes of school improvement. Remember, Tiffany talked about continuous improvement. Your ACIP is that plan that drives continuous improvement. The ACIP provides clear goals. It provides clear goals and benchmarks, performance indicators. It's what you will use to continuously monitor your performance, to see if you're actually meeting the goals of continuous improvement. The ACIP is an evidence-based process that ensures that all of your funding sources are being spent effectively. You're not wastefully spending them, or the principals are not, I should say. It is a living document. It should be monitored and reviewed and revised throughout the school year. It should not just be created and turned in, submitted by the deadline, and then never looked at again. Until next year, we have to do the same thing. It should be continuously reviewed and revised. And it is developed annually. Like I just said, developed annually and regularly reviewed. So the foundation of the ACIP is your comprehensive needs assessment. And what is that? That is identifying actually what your needs are based on your data. The data is what's going to drive all the steps and actions and things that you need to put in place to improve student achievement. And then creating the ACIP is not the sole responsibility of the principal. You have to have a team of people to create the ACIP. Now, ESSA provides us with a continuous improvement process, right? ESSA is our law. And what it says is if we follow these steps in this cycle, follow all the steps in this cycle, we can actually begin to see improvement and continuously improve. So beginning with identifying the local needs, then after you identify your needs, you select your evidence-based interventions. What are these interventions what are the interventions that are going to address the needs? How can we address the needs? We just can't say, hey, I think I'm gonna try to do, no, you have to find something that is actually going to address the need that you have discovered based on your data. Then you have to plan for implementation. This is a step that is oftentimes skipped. It is skipped. You just go from buying the intervention to implementing the intervention. There's no plan to implement the intervention. Why is planning to implement an important step? How many of you have those 40-year veterans on staff who still don't like technology? But you're spending money on it, right? How are you gonna get that person to implement it? You gotta figure it out, right? How many of you have those helicopter parents who always have something to say about what's going on in the school? How can you deal with them and implement what you need to implement to address the needs? How can you bring them on board to make them part of it. So you have to plan your implementation. Don't just jump to implementation. Plan how you're going to do it. Then implement, and then, of course, you have to evaluate it. Examine and reflect on what happened. Did it work? It didn't work? Did we waste our money? Do we need to spend more money? Figure out what you need to do. And of these 5 steps, you'll see when each of them should take place. And you'll see the majority of the 5, 3 of the 5, will take place when? In the spring. Because during the summer and the fall, you have the students in the building. That's the implementation part. You're figuring out, is this working? Is my plan working? Then you review and begin again in the springtime. But your plan should never begin when the students, you should never develop your plan once the students are in the building. It's too late to do that. Your plan should be implemented. Don't start writing the plan when they get there. Implement the plan when they get there. So that means that you should be on stage 4 by the time students begin. You shouldn't be identifying needs in August. Okay? And when you put all this together, you have a continuous improvement plan. Now, our continuous improvement plan is located in the eProve platform, which is through Cognitive. And these are the 3 areas in that platform, the surveys, the diagnostics, and the strategies that comprise or make up your ACIP. And if you do not have access to this, because everybody in here should have access to this platform, if you do not, please let me know, and I will contact our representative to ensure that you do have access to the eProve platform. Why do you need access? Because you have to approve the plans. You are the LEA representative who needs to approve the plan. Another thing to add to that list, that's about 293 things. So, a part of your ACIP, you begin with your surveys, parent surveys, teacher surveys, student surveys. And based on the data listed in these surveys, you will begin developing, you'll identify what your needs are. What are the parents saying about the school and the programs and the activities? What do the students say, most importantly? Are they satisfied? Do they want something different? The teacher surveys, how are they feeling? And from those surveys, in the survey section, you will go down to the diagnostics area and complete, you won't, but the principals will, the school teams will, complete the comprehensive needs assessment. Go through your ACIP assurances. Complete your Title I parent and family engagement form. You have money, right? There is money allocated under where for your parent and family engagement? Title I, because you have to have that plan, right? Here you go. School-wide, the Title I coordination of resources. This is each school's budget. And each school principal needs to complete this document. This is a must-have. Complete this document to identify how all local, state, and federal funds will be allocated. So please make sure that document is completed. And then from all of these items, you will go into completing your ACIP, developing your strategies, your initiatives, your activities to address the needs that were identified in these areas. And the annual implementation plan will serve as the completed ACIP. Any questions so far? Again, this is just an overview. And the school level needs assessment, let's talk about that. Once you get all your data and you identify the needs, who's going to be a part of that team to come up with the strategies, the activities? Who's a part of that team? Whoever you think it should be on that team. It will begin with the principal because the principal is ultimately responsible for the ACIP. Then you have your other school leaders, your reading coach, your math coach, your assistant principal, teachers, parapros, other school staff. Who falls under that category? The janitor, Do you have students who talk to your custodians? Yeah, they probably have better relationships than you realize. The coaches, right? The secretary, the bookkeeper, definitely. Get your other school staff members on these teams. Parents, of course, students, district administrators, that is you. Probably the SPED director, the tech coordinator, the curriculum person. They all have a different perspective of what needs to be done and how it should be done to improve academic achievement. And then you have your community members. This is important, especially for those who are in secondary schools. Why is it important for community members to be a part of it? They hire your high school students. They see what they come to them with. And if they want their businesses to grow and be better, they need better employees. So think about it. It's all connected. So please make sure you have at least one community member on the team. Well, not you, the principals. And then the data. What data can you use to complete your surveys? To identify where your needs lie. Of course, it's going to start with your federal report card. When they come out, they'll be out soon. Then you have your academic data, your summative data, discipline reports, dropout rates, staff profile. How many of you have an excessive number of non-certified teachers in the buildings? Everybody should be raising their hands because education has gone into that realm, unfortunately. You have your parents on there, your parent data rather, your observation tools, and then your program evaluation. So these are some of the items that can be used, some of the data sources that can be used to help identify where your needs lie. And then you ask your question, well, now that we have all the data, we've gone through it, we've analyzed it, we have to prioritize these needs. We can't solve every problem at once in 1 year. We can't do it. So what's most important? Where do you begin first? And that's what that ACIP leadership team is going to discuss. Because it's a chain reaction, a domino effect, right? We all know academic achievement is the goal, but how do we get there step by step to build and increase capacity so we can reach our goals? So to assist you with all that you have to do to help you spread out your work throughout the course of the school year, we are offering you this suggested calendar. And as you can see, we strongly suggest, when certain items should be done. In the summer months, your spring and summer months, look at what you're doing. So we should already have collected data. July has passed, you had a great time in Mega, you got some good information. But now it's time to analyze and prioritize your needs, complete your needs assessment, and actually create that ACIP. August is when you're going to implement your ACIP. Why? Implementation begins when students return to school. Then September, we're implementing. October, that is the deadline for submitting your ACIP, a completed ACIP in Hebrew. The deadline. It is not the due date, it is the deadline. Understand the difference. So October 15th is when all ACIPs must be uploaded in Hebrew. November, try to reconvene your team in November, February, and May. Reconvene that team and look at how well your strategies are working. Use the data, that quarterly assessment data, your quarterly attendance data, whatever data is available to see are our strategies working. And if not, what do we need to do to change them? If they are, do we stay where we keep implementing it the way we're implementing it, or do we need to change it to ramp it up, make it better? So reconvene your team at least 4 times throughout the year. During the mid-year, make sure you complete your mid-year reviews. And during your mid-year reviews, it's important to know and understand that you analyze how well you have spent your money. Are you wasting money or is it working for you? Please do not allow principals to go into mid-year reviews talking about the number of grandparents that showed up on Grandparents' Day. Don't talk about the fall festival, how much of a success it was. We don't need to know any of that in the ACIP, in your mid-year reviews, because it's not part of the ACIP. Your mid-year review is based on the ACIP and the strategies that are in there. You, as the leader of this team, the district leader of this team, need to know about how well that money is being spent, the effectiveness of it. So again, please remember that your ACIP, the deadline for your ACIPs is October 15th. Your ACIP includes all parts of these 3 areas. And if the 15th falls on a weekend, the ACIP is due when? That tells me nobody's paying attention, because I don't have the flavor. What does it say? The next business day. The next business day. If it falls on a Saturday, it's due when? Monday. If it falls on Sunday, it's due Monday. But this year it does not fall on a weekend, so therefore it is due on a Wednesday. If you need assistance developing your ACIP or helping principals develop their ACIPs, we do have access to online training videos through these particular hyperlinks. Our Cognia resources page, please make sure you visit that. You'll find all kinds of helpful resources that will help you through your journey in developing and implementing, monitoring, and evaluating the ACIP. And for those of you who would like an in-depth training, we are offering a series of training for your ACIP development. We have beginning of the year, middle of the year, and end of the year. But the beginning of the year information is listed here. The QR codes are available for you to log in now and register for either of these sessions. The second session is 2 half-day sessions. The second session is a repeat session, so you do not need to attend both. But we will partner with Dr. Nicole Reeves of Cognia. She's an outstanding trainer. And members of our OSI team who also provide support for schools in developing the ACIP. And we work together to go through an in-depth training of this process. And there's more. Additional ACIP training. Like I told you, we'll have mid-year training and end-of-the-year training to make sure we go through each of the phases of the ACIP. ACIPs are not just for schools that are in school improvement. Every school in the state of Alabama must complete an ACIP. It's not optional. So please make sure all of your principals complete an ACIP. And if you are attending any of these ACIP trainings, please make sure that you bring your principals and they bring members of their team. We have enough seating for at least 70 people in each setting, so please bring the teams that will be working on this. And if you have any questions, my information is there, and if I am not available, Dr. Hawkins will be happy to assist you in my absence. Yes. And here's Molly.
Okay, so I know Damon said if you would like more information or more in-depth training to attend the sessions, but my recommendation, particularly for those of you guys who are new directors, sign up, attend the trainings, and this is why. You don't have to question, when is it time to do the mid-year reviews? When should I start doing the end of the year? All of the trainings are around the cycle of improvement, so we're gonna have this training right before it's time for you to do what you need to do at the beginning of the year. Then the next training, Dana, if you would click again, the next training is around the mid-year review. So this is in December, in January is when we'll start that mid-year review process. We're gonna walk you through it. And then the end of year, process that you need to do will come around the time of the training. So if you just follow the training, we're gonna walk you through the steps. That's one thing that you don't have to worry about. Take it off your plate. Basically, they'll go through it. You'll have basically like a template. We'll walk you through it throughout the different trainings, and then you'll be able to go back to your LEA, put it in place, and then hopefully, again, that's one thing that's off your plate. If you're new, and you don't wanna have to stress about, when do I do this? How do I start these conversations? What do I do? Just attend the trainings. We're gonna walk you through the process.
And next we have Amanda Ryland again. She has the phone. And Brittany has the floor.
All right, so I'm going to be talking to you about some different fiscal components of the grant. Some of those were already taught to you earlier, thank goodness, by Tiffany, because she's so much better at explaining things than I am, but I am going to try to get through this, and of course my coworkers are going to let me know if I say anything wrong or if I forget to say something at all, okay? All right, so we're going to talk today about indirect costs and direct costs, maintenance of effort, supplement not supplant, and waivers and flexibility. All right, so first we're going to discuss the difference between direct and indirect costs. So please keep in mind that direct costs are costs that can be identified specifically with a particular cost objective or your particular grant, okay? Such as a federal award. So these are going to be costs that you can pay for with the grant, pay directly for with the grant, okay? Then you've got indirect costs. Indirect costs are those costs that may have a joint purpose. It's things like electricity, the phone bill, the rent of a building, things like that. Things that would apply in some ways to multiple federal programs, or not just federal programs, but multiple funding sources, okay? The biggest thing to remember when it comes to direct versus indirect costs is you have to be consistent across all federal programs. So if you say something is an indirect cost for one federal program, you have to say that it's an indirect cost for all the other federal programs. So just an example of this, some of you may or may not know that my husband works for CMP, and they often have times when the child nutrition program, they try to charge that program for electricity because that kitchen uses a lot of electricity with all of the stoves and the big walk-in coolers and things like that. It uses up a lot of electricity for that building, and so they try to charge electricity to child nutrition as a direct cost, or at least a portion of the school's electricity to child nutrition. But they can't do that because in all of our other federal programs, we say that things like electricity are an indirect cost because they could apply, because they're used for multiple federal programs. Electricity, is used when you're implementing all of the programs in that school. So you can't, and I'm mentioning child nutrition even though that's not federal programs, but it's still a federal fund source, right? A federal grant. And so you have to be careful that if you're saying that something is a direct cost in one place, it's a direct cost for another grant. If it's an indirect cost for one grant, it's an indirect cost for all of your grants, okay? So just be careful, be mindful of that. All right. Also, as far as your funding goes or your applications goes, when you have a specific cap, then the administrative costs are combined with the indirect costs to go towards that cap. Okay, so your cap has to include all of your direct administrative charges as well as any of your recovered indirect charges. All right, so any of the times earlier when I mentioned there was a cap, indirect costs goes towards that cap also. All right, any questions about direct versus indirect costs? All right. Maintenance of efforts. This is one that's really covered more by accounting, but we want you to know about it. Maintenance of effort is basically us determining that the LEA has maintained its fiscal effort in accordance with ESEA, and that basically, or it specifically states that you have to spend at least 90% of what was spent the previous year on public education. So you can show that in one of two ways. You can do it by per student spending, basically how much is spent on each student, or you can submit your total spending, which is your overall amount that was spent by the LEA and the state combined all together, okay? Again, that's reported to accounting. We don't handle that, but we wanted to make you aware of what that is. And the LEA accounting will notify LEAs who are not meeting the requirements, okay? So if you have a question about MOA, I mean, this is about as much information as we can give you. You can call LEA accounting. They're the ones who are the experts on that. All right, next is supplement, not supplant. This is one of the ones that I always get nervous when I have to talk about because it can be confusing, but we're going to take it slow together. All right, so supplement, not supplant. This provision is basically saying that all federal funds are supplementary to your state and local and other funds, right? They have to be used for supplemental services, not to take the place of your local and your state funds, okay? And the reason for this is the federal government wants to make sure that those federal title funds are providing additional support to those disadvantaged students rather than replacing state and local funding, okay? So, in other words, it exists to guarantee that Title I schools receive all the state and local funds they would otherwise receive if they were not eligible for Title I funding. So we don't want an LEA to say, okay, this school over here gets all this extra money, so we're going to give our state and local funds to the other schools. Can't do that, all right? There is a link, and when we send you the PowerPoint, there is a link to the actual provision here at the bottom. All right, so for Title I, we're going to specifically talk about Title I. Supplement not supplant applies to multiple federal title programs, but this is Title I. It's a little bit different than the other ones, okay? So for Title I, main thing to think of, or the main thing that you have to show, is that you make available your state and local resources. I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay, so LEA uses federal funds received under Title I. This is actually the wording from the ESEA. Okay. All right, so this is just a repeat of what I've already said, basically. All right, so let me go ahead. Okay, this is where I thought I was. All right, so you have to demonstrate the methodology that you use to allocate your state and your local funds to every school that's receiving Title I Part A, really to all of your funds. Basically, what this is saying is you have to make sure that your state and local funds are distributed evenly in a Title I neutral manner. So in other words, you cannot take into consideration whether a school is receiving Title I funds when you're distributing your state and local funds, okay? So you have to show that you took your state and local funds and distributed them equally among all of your schools without taking into consideration whether some of those schools were getting Title I funds or not. All right, got there in the end. All right, so this is kind of new because there used to be, we'll talk about some other provisions you had, or things you had to consider with supplanting for Title I, but this was to make this new thinking behind what you have to show was to make it where your Title I funds could be used more easily and you'd have more flexibility. So you no longer have to show that those expenses are supplemental, okay? As long as you can show that you allocated your state and local funds in a Title I neutral manner, you don't have to specifically talk about things being supplemental in Title I anymore, okay? So here's how you can do that methodology. You can choose one or a combination of some of these methods. You can show your per pupil allocation. So you can show that you distribute a fixed amount of funding to all of your students, regardless of that student's Title I status. You could do a weighted per pupil allocation, where you provide additional funding based on students' characteristics. So you could say that we're going to give more money to a certain grade level or to English learners or something like that. But again, without consideration of the school's Title I status. You could look at personnel and non-personnel resource-based allocations. So in other words, you distribute your staff positions and your non-personnel resources to schools based on enrollment or some other factor. But again, that factor cannot include the school's Title I status. Or you can do a combination of any of those things, all right? The key requirement is that whatever methodology you use to distribute your state and local funds is Title I neutral. All right, everybody with me so far on Title I? Sounds pretty good, easy. All right. All right. Demonstration of compliance. So you have to demonstrate that you are in compliance with this. You only have to do it one time during the duration of that Title I-A program unless your methodology changes. So you guys are new. If you go in and see that your demonstration of compliance form hasn't been updated in 3 or 4 years, that's probably okay. Because as long as you're using the same methodology and you haven't changed that, then you don't have to update it year to year to year. You can just keep uploading the same form. But if you ever change your methodology, then you have to describe what that new methodology is on a new form and submit that instead. All right? Everybody with me on that? So you being new, if you go in and see that your forms are old, it's probably okay. It's probably that you're just using the same methodology that you've been using for quite some time and you haven't changed it, and if that's the case, that is fine. When you upload this document, you're going to upload it under improvement planning, related documents. Okay, the document has to be uploaded every year. Even if you haven't made any changes to it, we still expect it to be uploaded each year. All right, now you can exclude some resources from your methodology. You can exclude expenditures for district LEA level costs, things like transportation or centralized administration. You can do that. But the feds just say, please remember that even if you exclude those items, those district-wide costs, that you still spend those dollars in a Title I neutral manner, okay? And that the feds could ask for you to prove that you're doing that, okay? But as far as the forms, you can exclude that if you want. Then there's some LEAs that may have an exception, okay? So you have to still turn in a demonstration of compliance form. I'm kind of skipping down to the bottom, but there's a box on there that you can check if you meet one of these exceptions. So please remember, even if you don't have to provide for us a methodology because you meet one of these exception requirements, you still have to submit the form. You just have to check the box showing what your exception is. All right, so LEAs that have a single school code. In other words, you just have one school in the whole LEA that serves all grades. They have an exception. All right, LEAs that only have Title I schools don't have to demonstrate their methodology. And then if you have a grade span that contains only a single school or only Title I schools or only non-Title I schools, then that is an exception as well. Okay? Any questions about exceptions? You still have to turn in a form. We're still going to expect that to be uploaded under your improvement plan, related documents, but you would just check what exception you meet. Yes?
Quick question. That second bullet exception, is that if all schools are eligible, or is that if you're not serving one or two of them because they have a low poverty rate?
Great question.
Then you definitely have to do the
SNS, and that's because you're comparing your non-title to your title to make sure that you are giving the same equitable amount to each of those schools. So off the bat, if you have title versus non-title, you're gonna have to do SNS.
So what that
Even-
second,
But,
You get to
so the
select.
schools are eligible, but they're not being served.
Right.
means
So
that
they're
they're
not-
serving them.
so I don't know if you all hear that question, but really that second bullet should say LEA with only Title I schools, and they're serving all of those Title I schools, okay? So if you have, even if you've got some schools that are Title I eligible, if you're not serving them, then you still have to demonstrate your method of compliance. Okay? Any other questions about this? All right. So we also have supplement, not supplant, that falls under your other title programs, and this is where it can get a little confusing, because these do have kind of the, keep forgetting what they're called. I'm gonna skip ahead real quick and come back to it. They have the presumptions. I don't know why I can't even remember that word. They have presumptions of supplanting. So I'm gonna go over this first and then I'm gonna go back, okay? So with these other programs, it's presumed that supplanting has taken place if one of these following instances occurs, okay? If you're using a federal funds to provide services that the LEA was required to make available under other federal, state, or local laws, okay? So if a law says that you have to provide something and then you use a title, any of the title funds to purchase that item, whatever it is, then that is supplanting. Okay, I'm gonna give you some examples in a minute. We're gonna go back. All right. Second presumption: if an LEA uses federal funds to provide services that the LEA provided with non-federal funds the year before, then it is presumed you're supplanting. All right, and then the third is if the LEA is using federal funds to provide services for participating children, and then non-federal funds for those children that are not participating. So in other words, let's say you had Title I-C migrant, if you're purchasing curriculum or books or something for your Title I-C kids with migrant funds, and then you're purchasing that same books for other kids, for your other non-migrant kids with your local or state funds, that would be considered supplanting. All right, so I'm gonna go back and let's look at this chart. Oops. Okay, so supplanting, what you have to look at depends on the title program as far as what funds are being supplanted. So for Title I-A and migrant, you have to make sure you're not supplanting your state and your local funds. All right? For Title II Part A, you want to make sure you're not supplanting non-federal funds. And then for the other ones, Title III, REAP, 21st Century, you want to make sure that you're not supplanting federal, state, and local funds. Now, this is one thing that this chart always used to confuse me, because I was like, what's the difference between state and local funds and non-federal? Like, isn't that the same thing? Well, no, it's not. So I provided this chart. It may or may not help you, but if you don't know the difference, you've got state and local, which includes, of course, your funds from your state and local governments. It includes your state appropriations, your local tax revenues, your state grants, okay? All of those funds are public, all right? Then you've got your non-federal funds. Non-federal funds include everything that we just talked about under state and local, but also includes private funds as well, or in some cases like tribal donations, things like, or tribal funds and things like that. So it could be public and private funds is what this is referring to when it says non-federal funds. And then for federal, state, and local funds, you're looking at all of your public education funds from federal, state, and local resources, but not necessarily private funds. Okay, and then of course your private funds would include any kind of funds that are donated to your system by individuals, foundations, private entities. For example, you may have, like Elmore County may get funds from the casino, things like that. Those would be your private funds. All right, so I got some little cheat sheets here to help me go over some examples of supplanting for different programs. All right, so Title I-C. An example of supplanting, Well, I've already mentioned this one. If you're purchasing books for Title I-C children with Title I-C funds, but then you're purchasing the exact same books using your local or state funds for all the other kids, that would be supplanting. Okay, another example would be, let's say last year you provided after-school tutoring, and that after-school tutoring included all kids, including migrant children. But then the next year you say you're going to provide tutoring for the migrant students using Title I-C funds, that would be supplanting. Okay, because you provided it for them the previous year with state and local funds. All right, Title II. Remember, you're looking at non-federal funds for Title II. Example of supplanting would be if you provide any kind of professional development that's required by the state. That cannot be paid for with Title II funds. That would be supplanting. Another example, easy one, if you paid for a reading coach the year before with your state and local funds, and this year you decide you're going to pay for it with Title II, that would be supplanting because you paid for it with state and local before. Another one to definitely remember is thinking about private schools, okay? Private schools use, maybe before your private school let you know that they're interested in getting Title II funds. In previous years, they always do some sort of professional development for their teachers. And now they have found you guys, and they now want Title II funds, and now they want to use those Title II funds to provide that same professional development they've always provided in the past. If that's the case, that would be considered supplanting. So you need to talk to your private schools and make sure that if you are providing professional development using Title II funds, that is something above and beyond what they typically had provided to their teachers in the past. Okay, you don't want them to supplant either. All right, Title III. Supplanting, there's a lot of requirements that come with serving EL students. So providing that core program, those core teachers. So if you purchase any of those core materials with Title III funds, that would be considered supplanting because they're required by the government, right? However, what about for a private school? Okay, same situation as before. You have a private school that reaches out that's never contacted you before, and in the past they've used their private school funds to pay for testing to see if students qualify if they're English learners, okay? Well, typically that wouldn't be allowed for a public school because that public school is required to do that testing and required to provide those services, but private schools are not, okay? So would it be supplanting if they use Title III funds to purchase testing materials and things like that for their EL students? What do you guys think? If they did it themselves last year with private funds, this year they are wanting to use Title III funds, would that be supplanting?
Yes.
Okay, let's look at our chart. Where does Title III fall? You have to look at federal, state, local funds. Last year, they paid for that testing using their private school tuition money or private donations, something like that. Do you have to consider private for Title III? No. Okay. Are private schools required to do testing for EL students? No, they're not. They don't have the same requirements as we do. So would that be supplanting? No, it wouldn't. So you can do that. You can purchase those materials for those private school students, and it would not be supplanting. See where it's kind of confusing? This chart is important. All right. Last one, refunds. Same general things. You use Title V funds to pay the salary of a reading specialist. And then you want to use refunds the next year to do it, or your Title V funds to do it the next year, that would be supplanting, unless you can show that those funds that they paid for that teacher the year before. So we're going to talk about that they no longer exist. So we're going to talk about that next. I'm trying to see if there's any anything else. Okay, if you use your REAP funds to purchase something that is a requirement, so like let's say that your system that uses a specific core math curriculum, you wouldn't be able to use your title funds to pay for that core curriculum because that is the responsibility of the LEA to purchase, not using Title V funds. Okay? All right, everybody with me? Did I forget anything? Okay, all right, so far. Okay, so far I think I'm all right. All right, so presumptions. I've already gone over those 3 presumptions. Again, you want to make sure that you are not using title funds to pay for something that is a requirement of the state, the federal, state, or local government. Okay, you want to make sure that you are using those that you're not using those federal funds to purchase an item that you used non-federal funds to purchase the year before. And then you want to make sure that if you can't just purchase supplies for the students who that title applies to and then use other funds to buy that same thing for all the other kids. Okay, so those are your presumptions of supplanting. Now, you can, if you do meet one of those presumptions, there is a way to demonstrate through documentation that if you can show that you would not be able to provide that service if those funds didn't exist, then it's okay. But you have to have documentation to show that. So, for example, if I'm over 21st century, so that's just popping into my head. Let's say you have an after-school program that you've been paying for with 21st century funds for the past few years, and you didn't get the grant next year, but you still want to continue to have an after-school program, then you could use your Title I funds to help pay for your after-school program next year, even though you used other federal funds to pay for it previously, okay? Which that's a little bit different, but that's other federal funds. But if you use other funds to pay it in previous years, other state and local funds, okay? All right.
Do you want that in the narrative?
Huh?
Do you want that in the narrative?
Do we want that in the narrative?
Just have
No.
to for compliance.
No, that's a compliance.
Yeah, okay, so that's something that we check for when we're doing compliance monitoring. All right, so you don't have to be specific on that. All right, now I will say this, if we see that you're paying for something, and there may be times when we question certain expenditures that we worry could potentially be supplanting. So there are times when we see, like for example, if you say that you're spending Title III funds on a teacher, and you're not specific that that teacher is supplemental, then more than likely we're going to reach out and say, hey, you might be supplanting, what is the situation with this, okay? So if things like that, you do want to be specific in your narrative so that we know that you're not supplanting. But if we ever, we don't necessarily always catch things, but if we do see things that we feel like might be a red flag, then we're going to ask you about it. Or we'll try to ask you about it. But we don't want you to get in trouble either. All right, just remember it is your responsibility, it's the responsibility of each LEA to make sure they comply with supplement, not supplant, okay? So if you ever are uncertain, you always can reach out to your specialist and ask questions. All right, here's a little quiz. And I think I gave the answer to this one already. Oops, sorry. All right, so Crenshaw Elementary uses Title III funds to purchase language textbooks for its EL students and then uses state and local funds to purchase those exact same textbooks for all other students in the school. Is that supplanting?
Yes.
All right, sorry, I gave you that one earlier. All right, last year, Jupiter School District paid for a professional development initiative with state professional development funds. This year, it uses Title IIA funds to pay for this same professional development initiative. Is this supplanting?
No.
All right, what do we think? Yes? Yes, that's right, it is supplanting. Okay. If you prayed for it with those funds the previous year, and now you're if you used state and local funds the previous year, and now you're wanting to use title funds to pay for that item, more than likely it's going to be supplanting, unless you can show that for some reason the funds you used the previous year no longer exist. In this this also kind of happened more frequently recently with like ESSER funds. There's a lot of things that you were allowed to purchase with ESSER funds, and then when they went away, you had to use other title funds to pay for those items. So, but ESSER, it didn't count because those funds went away. So, that was your rebuttal to that being, supplanting. All right? Any questions about supplement, not supplant? I think that's my only little quiz. Questions? All right. A few more things, or I think just a couple more things to talk about. Waivers. All right. So here is the law, or the provisions about waivers under ESEA. Basically, what you need to know is that you are not supposed to go over 15% carryover each year, but you are allowed to submit a waiver to allow your carryover funds to go above the 15% once every 3 years. Okay? So if your carryover goes over 15%, then once every 3 years, you can submit a waiver. Now, there are certain times when that is waived, like during COVID, you know, that requirement was waived, I think, for a little while. But in general, this is the rule when it comes to waivers. All right, again, every 3 years. LEA accounting will let you know if your carryover is going to go over that 15% once your final expenditure report has been submitted. So they will reach out to you and let you know that you've gone over the 15%. And if you do want to do that waiver request, then you have to send in a letter of request justifying why you would like this waiver. There is a template on the ALSDE resource page that you can use to help you write this letter. It does need to be put on your LEA letterhead, and then you have to actually physically mail it to LEA accounting, and it needs to be addressed to Dr. Mackey. Again, put on official school letterhead, and it has to have a wet ink signature. All right, if you want to submit a waiver. Yes?
To clarify, that's Title 1A only.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Title 1A only is what that applies to, okay? For your 15%. Any questions about that? All right, that's it for me. Next up is Brittany Simmons.
Greetings, everyone. I think I stand between you and leaving, so you help me, I help you, Bill. All right, okay. Technical assistant. I think that's gonna be a compass every time you see me, it'll be something different. So right now I'm really feeling the compass, you know. Oh, it's not on? Hello, testing. Okay, so a compass, I'm not Siri, okay? So we're being fooled with Siri, like, hey, take me to Longhorn. It'll tell you where to turn, how many miles. That's not my job. I'm a compass, okay? I'm old school. All I can do is guide you. I cannot direct you, okay? All right, so you got me? You feel me? Okay, so when I'm thinking about this, by the numbers, I believe we have 152 LEAs because when I pull up how many applications we have, it's 152. 35 of you are new, okay? So congratulations. I believe on my notes that 4 of you guys will be going through compliance monitoring this year, okay? 11 of you guys will go through compliance monitoring next year. So you need to really kind of chime into me. To the people who, you indicated 1 to 3 years, okay, it's 27 of you guys in the state. 8 of you guys are going through compliance monitoring this year. 5 of you guys are going through compliance monitoring next year, okay? So even though you're like, oh, I'm not worried about monitoring this next year, little do you know what you type in your application may be used when you're going through compliance monitoring next year. So kind of treat this year, I don't know who said it yesterday, raise your hand. The person was like, can we use this year as a pilot? Great way of thinking, great way of thinking. So, let's play a game. I know you're tired of our games, right? But let's play a game because you might need TA if you do not have to use your cell phones, okay? My game is very simple. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand, just simply smile. Okay? I'll give you like 5 seconds to read what's on the board, and then I'm going to say, all right, who smiled? Or number 1 smiles at number 2. Got it? Okay? You guys will catch on. Don't worry about it. And maybe I don't want you to catch on, so you'll lose. So anyway, round 1, okay? Again, so you might need TA if, and this is for the new hires, and let's define new hires. That means you were hired this year, like let's do real basic calendar year, January 2025 to now. You were hired, okay? So those are my new people, okay? All right, let's see how many of you guys smile at number one, okay? Okay, number two. All right, number three. Just smile, because nobody else can see it but me, guys. I don't have the great finish for it. All right, number four. Okay, next two. Number five. Don't laugh, it's not a laughing, it's just simply smiling. You're telling on yourself. All right, and then number six. All right, and number seven. Okay. All right, so that's for my new hires, okay? So now, this for my 1 to 3 year people, remember, that means you were hired before January of this year. I'm just gonna lump all you guys together, okay? So if you were hired in 2024, you're pretty much a veteran in this room, okay? All right. Okay, so now we got a good divide, right? Okay. All right, so same rules. Give you a few seconds to read, and I'm just gonna ask you to smile. Okay, number one. All right, number two. Now they clarify. Can I just put it in the history? Like, no. This has to go back, love. This has to go back. Okay, next is. Okay, number three. Number four. Nobody should smile now. This is time you do not smile. Number four. Good job. All right, 5 and 6. 5. Number 6. Do not smile at number 6, okay? That's a setup, okay? It's definitely more than that flyer on the front office that you have for compliance monitoring business. All right, and 7 and 8, I love number 7. You're like, I'm gonna be funky this time. I'm gonna be 2290. Never use that. Or number 8. Okay, because honestly, you didn't have this job when this program was paid for, so how are you gonna evaluate? So you just like, yeah, I'm just gonna write what I think. No one should be smiling. No one should be smiling. All right, so round 2. Fairly simple, okay? I'm gonna give you 30 seconds, and I need 2 volunteers just to tell me another sentence I could use for next time, okay? So that you might need TA if. So you create the scenario. So I'm gonna give you 30 seconds, and then 2 volunteers, you tell me a good one, okay? So starting now. I would have my theme music, but you know. Okay, and we're gonna do this the old school way. 10 seconds have passed. You might need TA if. Hold on, wait. Okay, you got one person want to volunteer. Okay. All right. So, do I have a second volunteer that's ready, or no? You want to hear what the first person says, then you want to make up your mind. Okay, that's how we do. So, first person. 1 second. Hold on. Tell your name and your LEA, please.
You might need TA if you don't know if you need TA.
Hey, you know, I don't know, Brittany. I might need you, I might not. That is a great one. All right, who's the second? You the second person? No, that was okay. Being the second person, second volunteer. Come on, come on. The more you tell me, the quicker we'll be out of here. Second person. Nobody.
I got one.
Who? You got one? Okay.
But you might need a TA.
You might need a TA if.
You're terrified to ask a question because you feel like you're the only one that needs to know that answer.
All right, so let me tell you guys about this. I hate the fact that no one wanted to play with me. So my 2 people come to the front because when you play with Brittany, you win. Okay, so my 2 winners, because they just want a gift card. Oh, so you played the little computer game thing, but you didn't want it. So you guys have a selection of a gift card. So if you would, because federal program directors, please understand, you have to sign for this. No, really, you have to sign for that. Your name and signature, because documentation really means that I didn't keep this gift card. I tried to lose my job over $25, guys. But like with everything, documentation documentation matters, so, wait, which one did you take? Oh, so you signed it. You just put up. What did you say? It's okay.
It was mine.
Okay, yes, ma'am. Next time I ask for some volunteers, I have some volunteers, right? All right, but as with anything, technical assistance, you are not alone. The two things that they say, you're like, yeah, that's how I'm feeling, because we're all in this together. If anything else, like Tiffany said, you might not know the answers, but you need to know where to find the resources. And most likely, your questions, someone is feeling the same way. Okay, so it's not about what you don't know. I didn't ask for volunteers to highlight, asking for someone to say something real broad or something real crazy. I'm just helping you. That's my job. So no matter how big, how small, let me help you. So let's shift from reaction to intention. So I honestly have two goals. The first one is to provide proactive, personalized. So I really have to talk to you to understand your situation. Because again, I'm not Siri, I'm a compass. So I can't just tell you what to do. I really have to guide you, and in order for me to guide you, I have to know, some things that, other people may say I'm too technical about. I need to know if you can go and ask your CSFO for the budget. Because some people can and some people cannot. So if you don't have access to the MacLear system, I need to know that because, okay, well, I might need to start telling you some LEA accounting jargon so you can get access. Or you have that relationship where, look, Brittany, my superintendent truly trusts me and I can do this, this, this. Okay, so you have free range. Well, now you need to really know what you're doing because it really falls on you. Like, you are it in your LEA. And then the second part is to build capacity. Not only with you, because the more I pour into you, the more you can pour into your principals and your superintendent, your CSFO. I don't want you to say, oh, the State Department said, or let me call the State Department. Maybe we get to the point where you feel comfortable answering those questions, or you can do like some of us and say, well, I think you need to read Edgar page such and such, fancy and things of that nature. So again, I'm just trying to be the compass that helps guide you, not direct you. And I can't tell you what to do. That's your needs assessment. Your data drives your decision. I'm not data, I'm Brittany, okay? So, when I'm thinking about this, if I've spoken to anyone today, you'll probably say, okay, how can I help you? And I'm doing this. I'm like, And it kind of reminds me of one of these wonderful people here. Because I'm just really getting in your business because I ask a lot of questions. But treat me like they treat, no one is ever mad at the host, okay? No matter what Mari says on that little card, okay? No one is ever mad at Mari. Mari's just reading the results of the test, okay? The lie detector test, the DNA test. No one is ever upset at Mari. He's telling life-changing news. So don't be mad at me like no one's mad at Mari. But all we're doing is reading the guidance. That's it. Now, the two in the middle, okay, over in Ricky Lake, like sometimes I just really want to hear it because I really want to see how I can guide you because I need to know, okay, you want to hire this person, but what's the real reason why you want to hire this person? Is it because like you really listen to the data, or you really like this person, or they're trying to leave the district and you're trying to entice them, or is this the only person who can do this job? Like I really have to like dig in. I'm not being nosy. I'm just really trying to see, okay, what's the angle of this, what you want? And the way I can stop being nosy, you said, well, freaking the data says this, and we did this needs assessment, and I looked at my evaluation, I don't really want to hear that. But when it's like, well, I really want to move this person, I'm like, tell me more, tell me more, tell me more. But when it's hard data-driven decision, that takes the fun. And then, I guess because I got technical assistance, because in our staff meetings, at the time I was only over Region 10, and Region 10 is very vocal. You all meet them at Mega, they're very vocal, I love them to death. They would always tell me some stuff like, you go back and tell, and you know what I did? I came back and told it, and I was sitting just like this in the meeting, and I was like, well, Region 10 said that they don't like this part of this, and I guess they're like, well, everybody loves telling Brittany their problems. So let's just make her technical assistant so everyone can tell her the problems. So I love telling the hot topics like, hey, we need to do this because it's a little gray area here. Okay, so that's what the feedback is. So when I'm asking questions, truly, don't get upset at me like Mari. Let me get to the bottom of it. And if it's something worth telling the state people, I'll let them know. Like, I'll sacrifice a tribute for you guys, okay? I will. The second part is, Brittany, I have this terrible application to like, hey, Brittany, I'm thinking of this. I love answering questions, but when it's like, Brittany, can we pay for this? You know, give me something tough, like, give me like, I really wanna try this because this district did it, and like, I like those questions. Don't ask me, is this allowable 30,000 times, okay? So we're just trying to move you from like, just fix it, to actually what's our framework, like, so maybe this year, we're not probably, hopefully this year we'll become close, but maybe now you're just implementing other people's ideas, okay, maybe because it's your new year, you really don't wanna venture out, but once you start doing what someone left you with, you're really gonna see what it may not work, and now you might wanna implement your spin on your district, and that's when I think we'll become close, okay? So, just to tie in everything that you've heard today, because we've heard from great speakers, from Dr. Hawkins to Tiffany, to compliance monitoring, to everything. So just to give you a full picture, everything has to go with your plan, okay? So the ACIP, please attend that. I'm not plugging for Dr. Williams, but it's something that's very valuable. Your needs assessment. I cannot say it, when you go to that planning side that Dr. Hawkins told you, if you don't click that you need something in elementary, please don't try to fund an elementary personnel, because that's where we go. When you go to your needs assessment and you click those boxes, that's what lets us know that you're actually looking at your plan. So if you're hiring an AP in middle school, and you have the whole middle school blank, we can't do anything, okay? Because you didn't check it in your needs assessment. Designing in your ACIP, okay? So when we go to your actual ACIP, maybe during compliance monitoring, we're checking the budget, we're checking that person, that amount, okay? That PPA amount, that parent engagement amount. We're looking for those amounts in your ACIP. So yes, you can't just leave it at the school and say, hey, this is your ACIP. You actually have to go to the school to make sure that they actually have the dollar amounts there, okay? Because you might have that you pay for 2 teachers, and we go to the ACIP, we only see 1 teacher. We know that it's not jive, okay? So within your handy dandy notebook that we gave you, your budgeting tools, okay? We briefly introduced you to the world of accounting, but that's not our free-all, you have to have a working knowledge, okay? And the same thing with the strategic budget. Okay, you have to understand that your CSFO, hopefully, that person is open and willing to work with you, but you need to know those codes yourself. Okay, start getting the working knowledge of what you use. I know we talk about monitoring, but it's nothing like being ready so you don't have to get ready, right? Because it's coming, okay? It's coming. And then while we're doing things, the common finding, there's a reason why we spent time on time and effort. There's a reason why we have that manual on ALSDE resource, because those are the findings. We realized that there was a lot of procedures that LEAs did not have, so that's why we created the template. So if it's anything we're beating like a dead horse, procurement, non-competitive, those are things because districts are making those mistakes, okay? And we don't want you to fall into those pit holes. And then the last thing is spending with focus. You heard Tiffany talk about continuous improvement. You heard Dr. Williams get up here and say, hey, we gotta make sure that we're continuously improving. The only way you can do that is if you evaluate. All right, so make sure that anything that you put in your plan is something you can evaluate. Yes, your PE teacher is going to ask for jump ropes, okay? And they're gonna make this whole slew about how jump ropes can, bring health to the class, because the PE teacher just wants jump ropes, right? And somebody told him he could have it, and everybody's asking you, right? All you have to say, okay, if I buy these jump ropes, guys, how are we gonna evaluate? Are you gonna go out there and do a survey to say how they felt before they jump rope? And then collect data on how they felt after they jump rope? And are you gonna keep up with? And then you realize that person really doesn't want the jump ropes that bad, they just wanted an item, and it saves you from being a no person to the person like, yeah, you really have to have your stuff together before you come and act. So just throw that in there, because you have to be intentional. You have to be in with a purpose. All right, so I like this picture because when you think about your priorities, your needs assessment, that should be reflected in your budget. Okay, it should be a direct reflection. And again, if you don't have something checked on that needs assessment, you really can't budget it. So check the box. So hopefully you saw this yesterday, because I feel like I realized over the years that we kind of just say acronyms all out. you know, RFP, PPA, EGAP, and you're like, I don't know this, well, I don't know this. So hopefully you got this paper that was on your desk, okay? And at the very bottom, you'll see that it had technical assistance. So Tiffany gave us some. Sorry I didn't have that PowerPoint before I printed this. But these are just some random ones. If you want to add to them, like Brittany forgot this one, you can email it to me. But this is just to give you some working knowledge, and hopefully it was useful for the last 2 days. So, monitoring, you're either 1 or 3 people, okay? You know, you're trying to play it calm and cool, but you know, you're shaking on the inside. Probably like me, if I were you, looking towards the hills with coming for my help. Or you may have had that talk and you already know that it's gonna be on fire and you just said it's gonna be fine, okay? But Dr. Williams and his team, they're very, very open. Technical assistance, I'm here if you need me, okay? If you need me, I just can't jump on. You gotta kind of ask me to help you, but we're in it together because we don't want to catch you doing something wrong, especially our new people. You're special to us, okay? Whether you know it or not. We had a whole conference just for you. I don't know. All right, so these are just simple tips. The one I did not add here is try to make friends within your region, okay? Especially your new people within your region, but also reach out to people that are also veterans in your region, okay? Because they know things, they've been around the block. So try to make a cohort, get the numbers of people here. But the last thing is to always have the evaluation and target your why. So I've kind of spoken on these throughout the presentation. Maintain regular documentation between your fiscal and programmatic as well as communication. Like you see me, I didn't give a gift card out until I had some signatures. When you meet with somebody, you know, have your agenda, have your sign-in sheet, have your documentation that it actually happened. The other thing is maintaining fiscal documentation by building. Like, I know in EGAP, everything, the budget's all together, but when you do your checks, try to go by building. Like, look at your LTEs by building. That may help you in your actual application, I don't know. But maintaining your fiscal documentation by building is something I've seen a lot of successful directors do. Reach out to your specialist if you have any questions. Region 9, hey, how you doing? I hope I met everyone here from Region 9. And also plan ahead for the summer. As you saw the examples that Dr. Hawkins had, we had $5,000 in summer school. I know you're thinking like, wait, that's a long way, but if that's something you want to do as a district initiative, put in your initial application. Do not wait until May to tell us you want to fund summer school as a district. I'm gonna be honest, it probably won't be approved because it wasn't in the initial application, and if you do it as a district set aside, it's pretty much locked, okay? So if that's something you wanna do, you have to make those decisions for a full year, okay? The fiscal year starts in October all the way till September, and the summer's in between there. So this is my contact, this is my email, and if you need me, please contact me, and hope you guys have a safe way home. Please be safe.
You guys, please do the evaluation. We just had one question in the parking lot, about training. When the auditors come, they look for evidence of training, wanting to know if this training is in Power School. Yes, it's in Power School. Most of you guys signed up prior to coming. If you didn't and you just added your name to the list, you need to sign up in Power School. It is still open, correct? Okay.
I'll double check tomorrow.
Okay. So
they can email me and I can add their name.
Perfect. Email Kelly Smith and she will add your name. That way you don't have to sign up in Power School. So the ones who signed the list, can you just add them in Power School?
Yes.
Perfect.
I'll go.
Make sure the city is legible. They print their name. If they are signed.
Okay, so if you signed the sheet, if you didn't register in Power School, but you printed and signed your name, Kelly's gonna add you. If you're here and you didn't do anything, you need to let Kelly Smith know so she can add you in Power School so you can get credit for being here. Any questions, last minute, anything? Questions, any follow-up, anything we need to do? State staff? Anybody who has not seen Angela yet, if you would, she's gonna stick around until 5 p.m. But she's gonna stay around for a little bit if anybody needs to see her. Amanda?
We do plan to have a second meeting in January, and so when you please do the evaluation, and, please do the evaluation, and if there's specific topics you want us to discuss in January, feel free to put that in there. But I think it's January, it's like the first week of January when you come back from the holidays, okay? But we'll send out more specific information, just go ahead and be aware that that's coming. But yeah, please go ahead and do the evaluation, we use that to help us plan.
Unless you guys don't think we need a meeting in January. If you feel like you've got it, don't need any more help, raise your hand. Anybody? No? Okay, just checking. All right, I think that's everything. Any, final comment, Becky? Final comment?
We are here to help you. Please do not feel like you are all alone on what I'd like to see out there. If you have questions, no matter how small you think it is, that's a legitimate question, please call us and we will help you through the process. It's gonna be a great year.
Thank you, guys.